I was driving west of Amarillo late one night with my friend Cody in the passenger seat. The highway stretched out endlessly in front of us, a straight line of asphalt lit by the high beams and fading into blackness at the horizon. The plains around us were flat and silent, dotted with the occasional fence post or oil pump silhouetted against the moonlight. It was the kind of road that could hypnotize you after a while, where the hum of the tires and the endless repetition of white lane dividers made you lose track of time. We had been on the road for hours, tired and restless, just trying to make it across Texas before dawn. That was when we saw him. At first, I thought it was just a man walking along the shoulder, maybe a hitchhiker or someone whose car had broken down, though I hadn't seen any vehicles on the side of the road for miles. He was standing near a faded mile marker, wearing a tattered denim jacket that hung loose on his shoulders. His arm lifted slowly as we approached, a weak wave, the kind someone gives when they're desperate and don't expect you to stop. Something about the way he moved caught my attention, like he was underwater, the edges of his body shimmering slightly in the headlights. Cody leaned forward and muttered, "You see that?" And I nodded, keeping my hands tight on the wheel. As we got closer, I slowed instinctively, torn between caution and curiosity. The man's face came into view, but it didn't look right. His features wavered like heat rising off asphalt in the middle of July. His eyes, nose, and mouth seemed to blur together, as if they couldn't quite settle into place. It was unsettling, almost nauseating to look at, and I felt a shiver crawl up my spine. I blinked hard, rubbed at my eyes, and when I looked again, the shoulder of the road was empty. Just dry grass swaying in the breeze and that old mile marker tilted to one side. Cody swore under his breath, twisting in his seat to look behind us. "He was right there," he said. "I saw him. Don't tell me I'm losing it." His voice carried that nervous edge, the kind where you're not sure if you're joking or if you're actually scared. I didn't answer because I didn't have one. My hands were clammy on the steering wheel, and I pressed harder on the gas, just wanting to put distance between us and whatever we had seen. The air in the car felt heavier, like the night had seeped inside with us. We drove on in silence for a few minutes until Cody pointed out something else. A shadow on the side of the road ahead, a figure standing still by a cluster of mesquite trees. I caught it in the headlights for a second. Same denim jacket, same blurred face. He wasn't walking this time. He was just waiting, staring at us as we passed. I glanced in the rearview mirror and he was gone again. The trees swayed in the wind, but the shoulder was empty. My chest tightened with unease. It didn't feel like a coincidence anymore, and I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was the fatigue, the late hour, our minds playing tricks. Highway hypnosis was real, and I'd heard stories of people seeing things after long drives at night. But Cody was wide awake and his voice shook as he said, "Man, I don't like this. It's like he's following us." The miles crawled by, the highway stretching endlessly in front of us, but the silence never lasted long. Every few minutes he appeared again, standing in the ditch beside the road, sitting on a guardrail, leaning against a bent speed limit sign. Each time, the blur of his face made my stomach twist, like I was staring at something I wasn't supposed to comprehend. The strangest part was the lack of detail. His jacket looked old, torn, the denim dark with stains I didn't want to identify. His jeans were dusty, his boots scuffed, but his face, it refused to become real. After the 5th time we saw him, Cody refused to look out the window anymore. He pulled his hoodie over his head and kept his eyes fixed straight ahead, mumbling prayers under his breath. I couldn't look away, though. My eyes darted to the shoulder every time the headlights touched a figure, half expecting him, half dreading it. I kept thinking maybe I'd see him clearly. Maybe the blur would settle into a real face, but it never did. The blur only deepened the wrongness, like the man wasn't meant to exist in this world. Somewhere past midnight, we stopped at a gas station just outside a tiny town whose name I didn't even catch. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead and the place felt deserted. I filled the tank while Cody went inside for snacks, trying to shake off the dread. But when I looked across the lot, there he was again, leaning against a payphone that looked like it hadn't worked in decades. His body was perfectly still, the denim jacket flapping lightly in the breeze, but the face remained a smear of features I couldn't place. My throat went dry, and when I blinked, the space was empty again. I didn't say anything to Cody when he came back, but he noticed the way my hands trembled as I took the wheel again. We pulled back onto the highway, the dark swallowing us whole. That was when something changed. Instead of appearing outside, he was suddenly closer. I caught him in the rearview mirror, sitting in the back seat. Just for a second, but it was enough. My heart slammed in my chest and I jerked the wheel hard enough that the tires screeched against the pavement. Cody shouted, grabbing the dash, but when I whipped my head around, the back seat was empty. After that, every reflection showed him. The side mirror, the rear view, even the black glass of the window seemed to hold a shimmer of his form. Always blurred, always indistinct, but there, watching. We drove for miles like that, too afraid to stop, too afraid to keep going. It felt like we'd fallen into some endless loop of asphalt and shadows, where the highway stretched on forever and there was no way off. Eventually, we reached Amarillo just as the first hint of dawn touched the horizon. The city lights broke the spell somehow. The blurred man didn't appear again and the mirrors were just mirrors. Cody and I didn't speak about it until days later. And even then it was in hushed voices, like speaking too loud might invite him back. But I'll tell you this, a week later, I was scrolling through an old forum about Texas ghost stories and found a thread about Highway 287 west of Amarillo. People talked about a hitchhiker in a denim jacket, face always blurred, seen for decades by truckers and late-night travelers. Some said he was the ghost of a man killed in a crash. Others claimed he was something older, something that never had a face to begin with. The last comment I read made my blood run cold. It said, "If you ever stop for him, don't let him look you in the eyes. If he does, you'll never make it out of Amarillo." I shut my laptop right then, but sometimes when I drive at night, I still see a shimmer on the shoulder, and I never ever slow down. I was driving west on Highway 281, the stretch that cuts past Stephenville where the fields go on forever, broken up by mesquite and barbed wire fences. The occasional farmhouse sitting back from the road with one yellow porch light burning like a weak beacon. It was late, maybe close to midnight, the kind of hour when traffic dies down and the only company is 18-wheelers that roar by with a blast of wind, or the endless wash of static on the radio when the signal gets lost in the emptiness. I had my windows down a little, cool fall air blowing in and the road humming beneath me. For a while I had a country station crackling in, but it faded, leaving only static. Normally I'd just switch it off, but something caught me this time. Inside the static, soft and almost playful, I heard a child's laugh. It was faint at first, but the rhythm of it was unmistakable. I sat forward, turned the knob back and forth, thinking maybe it was bleed over from another channel, but no station came through. Only static with that laugh hidden inside like a whisper in the middle of a storm. I felt my stomach tighten. There were no houses around, no neighborhoods. No reason for any signal interference that carried a child's voice at that hour. I told myself it had to be some random coincidence of frequency, something natural. But the longer I kept listening, the clearer it got. Not just laughter, but what sounded like a little boy humming, almost singing tunelessly along with the static. The kind of absent humming kids do when they're playing with toys. I tried to tell myself I was hearing what I wanted to hear, like people who hear words in white noise. I reached for the knob and turned the volume all the way down. The static died, but the laughter didn't. It was behind me, quiet at first, then distinct, bubbling up from the back seat like someone sitting there trying not to be noticed. My hands tightened on the wheel and I forced myself not to look in the rearview mirror right away. My breath caught and every instinct screamed to pull over, but the road was black and empty, the kind of place you don't want to stop unless you have to. Finally, I glanced up at the mirror. Nothing but the dark shape of the back seat, faint outlines of my jacket tossed across it, and the occasional reflection of headlights far behind. But the sound was there, right behind my ears now. A soft child's giggle, like whoever it was thought this was funny. My scalp prickled so hard it hurt. I tried to speak, my throat dry. "Who's there?" My voice cracked. The laughter stopped immediately, cut off like it had never been there. The silence that followed was worse than the noise, stretching out thin and heavy, and every mile felt longer. I couldn't breathe right, couldn't shake the feeling that if I reached back with one hand, I'd brush against something small and cold. I forced myself to keep my eyes on the road, headlights catching the endless barbed wire and fence posts. My ears strained, waiting. And then the whisper started. Not laughter anymore, but a low, broken whisper right behind me. Words I couldn't make out, like someone talking into a pillow. I turned the radio back up just to drown it out, but the static blasted through the speakers and layered right on top of the whisper, until I realized the voice was coming through both the radio and the back seat at the same time. It was the same sound doubled, one inside the speakers, one just inches behind me. My chest tightened and my hands felt weak. I thought about pulling into Stephenville, but the town was still miles ahead. Then something cold brushed the back of my neck, quick and light like a child's fingers. I jerked forward and almost swerved off the highway. My headlight swung across the bar ditch, dust rising before I steadied the wheel. My heart hammered so loud I thought I'd black out. I shouted again, louder, "Stop it!" "Who's there?" My voice sounded wild in the empty car. The laughter came back, louder this time, right in my ear, high-pitched, giddy, like the child was pressed up close to the side of my face. I floored the gas pedal, engine roaring as I pushed 80, 90, just to get through the night faster. The fences blurred by, my hands shaking so badly I thought I'd lose control. I glanced once more into the mirror, and for a split second I swore I saw something small leaning forward from the back seat. A pale face blurred like heat rising off asphalt, wide eyes staring into mine. I blinked and it was gone, just shadows in my crumpled jacket. But the laugh didn't stop. It followed me all the way into town, softer now, as though retreating, but still there like a memory stuck in my head. When I finally pulled into the first gas station, bright lights washing over the car, I jumped out and yanked open the back door. Nothing, just the jacket, the floor mats, the empty seat. But the moment I slammed the door, the radio snapped on by itself. Static filled the air, and under it, clear as day, the child's voice whispered, "You heard me?" My blood went cold. I ripped the keys out of the ignition, but the radio stayed on for a heartbeat longer, just long enough for one last laugh to echo out into the night. Then silence. I stood there shaking under the fluorescent lights, staring at the car like it was a trap. I never drove that stretch of 281 at night again, and I don't play with the radio static anymore, because somewhere between Stephenville and the darkness out on that road, there's something that rides with you, hidden in the noise, waiting for someone to listen long enough to let it in. I was driving south on I-35 late one humid night in early September, the kind of Texas night where the air feels heavy enough to push against your chest. My shift had been long, the delivery dragging on, and the road stretched ahead of me like an endless ribbon of headlights and blacktop. The radio hissed low static under a faint country station, and I kept my eyes fixed between the dotted white lines and the occasional flash of reflective green highway signs. Just past Waco, where the interstate splits into loops and frontage roads before settling back into its straight path, I saw her. A woman standing by the grassy median, waving her arms slowly like she was flagging down help. She was dressed in white, a pale glow under the sodium lights, her hair long and loose, hanging in strands that moved even though there wasn't any wind. At first glance, I thought maybe she was a stranded driver, maybe even drunk, because who else would be standing out there at midnight on that stretch of road? But when I passed her, when my headlights swept across her face, I realized something was wrong. Very wrong. Her face wasn't a face at all, at least not the way it should have been. It looked stretched long, like someone had grabbed the sides of her cheeks and pulled down until her jaw unhinged, wider than it should ever open. I saw the gaping blackness of her mouth, the pale ridges of something that looked like bone where skin should have been, and eyes set too far apart, black and reflective like an animal's. The sight was so sudden, so unreal, that my foot jerked against the pedal, and the whole truck swerved slightly into the next lane. I cursed out loud, steadying the wheel, and when I looked back through the mirror, she was gone. No car behind me braked or swerved. No one else even slowed down. It was as if she hadn't been there at all. I told myself exhaustion was messing with me, that long hours on the road can do things to your head. Hallucinations, tricks of the light, reflections that don't add up right. I had enough experience to know drivers see things when they're running too long without sleep, but the image of her face clung to me sharper than any dream. The stretched skin, the mouth yawning black, the way her hand waved as if she was asking for help. It didn't feel like a trick. It felt like something had wanted me to see it. I kept the radio low, more to fill the silence than anything else, and drove another hour before pulling into a rest stop to stretch my legs and shake it off. The lot was half empty. A couple of semis parked under buzzing lights, and the air smelled of asphalt and fried food from the vending area. I didn't tell anyone what I'd seen. Not then. Who would believe me? A trucker claiming he saw some inhuman woman on the median of I-35 would just get laughs and a joke about laying off the caffeine pills. But over the weeks that followed, I started to hear things. Not directly, Not from anyone official, but in the way drivers talk over coffee and pie at greasy diners, or on the CB when the night gets long and people trade stories to stay awake. More than one mentioned a woman in white near the split south of Waco, always waving, always looking like she needed help. Some said when they stopped there was nothing there, just grass and wind and tire shreds. One guy swore he stopped for her and found a patch of ground where the dew had been pressed down, as if feet had been standing there but no one to be seen. Another said she stepped into the road and when his lights hit her, her face wasn't human. He never went into detail, just muttered that it looked wrong and changed the subject. I tried to laugh it off. Maybe it was a kind of road legend. The same way people talk about ghost hitchhikers or the vanishing woman who leaves a coat in your cab and disappears before dawn. Truckers live off stories. We keep the road alive by passing them around like currency, but every time someone brought her up, my stomach tightened, because I knew what I'd seen wasn't just a tale. It had been real, too real. One night, about 3 weeks later, I was heading down that same stretch again. It was later than before, closer to 2 in the morning, and the highway was nearly empty. My headlights carved twin tunnels into the darkness, and I kept thinking about her, the pale shape waving at me. I told myself I wouldn't look, that I'd keep my eyes forward and never glance at the median. But as soon as I reached that stretch, I saw her again, same spot, same slow wave. My chest locked up, my breath shallow, but this time something was different. Her arm didn't move like a normal arm. It bent too far, like the elbow joint had reversed, and the pale hand swung back and forth like it was barely connected. My instinct screamed not to look at her face, but I did. I couldn't help it. The jaw was wider, unhinged to the point of tearing, and I could see something moving inside, shapes shifting in the darkness like too many tongues, like something was living inside her throat. Her eyes snapped toward me, catching the reflection of my high beams, and I swear they glowed white for a split second. I pressed the gas, tearing past her as fast as I could, my knuckles white on the wheel. The rearview mirror showed nothing, just blacktop and emptiness. The worst part wasn't seeing her. It was what happened after. The radio went dead silent, the faint static gone, and I heard something else. A faint breathing, slow and wet, like someone was sitting in the cab with me. I flicked the dome light on, heart hammering, but the cab was empty. My seat creaked as if weight had shifted on it, and I could smell something faint and sour like damp earth. I didn't stop. I didn't even slow down. I drove straight to San Antonio without resting once, and when I finally parked, I was shaking so bad I couldn't write out the logbook properly. Since then, I avoid that stretch whenever I can, even if it means taking the long way around. Other truckers still talk about her, the pale woman who waves for help south of Waco. Some laugh. Some swear. A few won't talk about it at all. I know what I saw, though, and I know what I heard in my cab that night. She isn't just a story. She's there waiting, waving to the next driver who dares to look too closely. And if you do, don't make the mistake of slowing down, because once she sees you, once her face twists toward you and that black mouth opens, I don't think you can ever really leave her behind. I was driving west out of Lubbock late on a Friday night, the kind of night where the air feels thin and dry against your skin, and the land around you stretches into flat, endless plains. The sky was a dark sheet of velvet, cloudless, and the moon hung pale and thin above the horizon. My headlights cut a narrow tunnel through the black, illuminating stretches of asphalt that seemed to unravel forever. There wasn't another soul out there. No houses, no businesses, not even the glow of a distant farm light. Just me, my truck, and the 2-lane road running straight as a blade. That's when I saw the tail lights. They were faint at first, red dots in the distance, but they were there. I almost felt relieved. Seeing another driver out on those barren roads makes you feel less like you've slipped into another world. I pressed the gas a little harder and settled in behind them. The red lights moved steadily, neither too fast nor too slow, and I fell into a kind of rhythm following them. The glow was hypnotic, swaying slightly as the road dipped and rose in gentle hills. I didn't think much of it at first. Just another late-night traveler, someone else trying to make it home or further downstate. Minutes rolled by, maybe 20. The tail lights never got closer, no matter how much I adjusted my speed, and they never faded either. They stayed the same distance ahead, glowing like beacons. I remember frowning at the dashboard clock, wondering why I hadn't gained on them at all. The road wasn't curving, wasn't branching, wasn't doing anything but leading us both straight through empty fields. I should have either caught up or lost them, but the gap never changed. Still, I told myself it was nothing. Maybe they were pacing me. Maybe it was just the way perspective played tricks on your eyes at night. Then I crested a rise. The kind of low Texas hill where you expect to see miles of road laid out in front of you like a ribbon. I eased the wheel, came up over the crest, and my stomach dropped. There was nothing. No car, no taillights, no faint glow in the distance. Just black highway stretching dead straight into emptiness. I tapped the brakes, confused. I leaned forward over the wheel, scanning for any sign of them. Nothing but asphalt in the flat horizon. At first I thought maybe they'd pulled off, but there was nowhere to pull off. The shoulder was narrow and dipped straight into scrub and dirt. No driveways, no side roads. I had been watching those lights non-stop, steady as heartbeat, and in the space of a second they were gone. I kept driving, slower now, feeling a kind of cold weight in my chest. My truck's engine sounded louder than it should have, echoing against the silence outside. The longer I went without seeing another vehicle, the worse it felt. Like I'd been tricked into following something that was never really there. 10 minutes passed, 20. No cars behind me, no cars ahead. It was as if the world had closed in around me, stripped away everything but that one strip of blacktop. I finally spotted a green highway marker and pulled over onto the gravel shoulder. I needed to breathe to convince myself I hadn't hallucinated. The engine idled rough as I sat there, window down, trying to listen to the night. The fields whispered with wind, dry grass shivering in the darkness. Nothing else. No insects, no frogs, no distant hum of tires on pavement. Just me and the quiet and the wide open dark. When I looked in the rearview mirror, I froze. 2 red lights, faint and far back, hovering in the distance. Tail lights. My mouth went dry. I twisted around to look out the rear window, but the highway behind me was empty. I looked back at the mirror, and the lights were still there, swaying slowly, the way a car might if the driver was drifting a little between lanes. I sat there for what felt like a long time, just staring at them, waiting for them to grow brighter to show that a car was really coming my way. They didn't. They just stayed where they were, exactly as they had when I'd first seen them. When I blinked, they were gone. I slammed the truck into gear and took off. My chest was tight, every hair on my arms prickling as I pushed the speedometer higher than I should have. I told myself I was just tired, that it was a trick of the eyes, that I'd been on the road too long. But I didn't believe it. I couldn't. Because after another stretch of silence and empty road, when I finally glanced up at the mirror again, the lights had returned. Not behind me this time, but up ahead, faint red dots pulling me forward just like before. I swear I almost turned around then and there, but there was nowhere to go but forward. No exits, no side roads, just the black highway threading through miles of nothing. So I followed them again. I didn't want to, but I couldn't stop myself. Something about those lights drew me in, like they wanted me to keep chasing, like they were leading me somewhere. I stayed locked on them for what must have been another 20 minutes. The gap never closed, never widened, just constant and steady. Then just like before, I crested another hill and they vanished, gone as if they'd never been there at all. That was the breaking point. I pulled off again, cut the engine, and sat there gripping the wheel hard enough to make my knuckles ache. The silence out there was unbearable. I swear the land itself felt hollow, like I was parked on the skin of something vast and waiting. When I finally forced myself to look in the mirror again, I saw not 2 red lights but 4, 2 ahead, 2 behind, perfectly spaced, perfectly still, hemming me in like markers on a road that didn't belong to me. I stared until tears burned my eyes, refusing to blink, refusing to give them the chance to disappear again. And when I finally blinked, they were gone. I don't remember the rest of that drive. I know I made it into town, because I woke up the next morning in a motel bed with the curtains drawn and the TV still playing static. My truck was parked out front, keys still in my pocket. But I couldn't tell you the last hour of that trip if my life depended on it. It's all a blank stretch in my memory, just like that road, endless and black and silent. I've avoided that highway ever since. Even during the day, even with other cars on the road, it feels wrong. Like if I go too far, if I stay on it too long, those taillights will come back waiting for me, ready to lead me off into some stretch of darkness I'll never come back from. And sometimes when I'm driving other roads near Lubbock at night, I think I see them in the distance, just 2 faint red glows swaying gently, always the same distance away, daring me to follow again. I pulled into the rest stop just outside Abilene sometime after midnight, more tired than I wanted to admit. The interstate had been nearly empty for the last 30 miles and I was running on too much coffee and too little rest. The fluorescent lights of the rest stop flickered against the flat West Texas darkness, buzzing with that hollow hum that made the silence in between feel heavier. There were 2 pickup trucks parked at the far end, both empty, and the building with the restroom stood like a square concrete block beneath a sky that seemed to press down on everything. I parked under one of the lights, killed the engine, and stretched my legs on the cracked pavement. The air was cool and dry, carrying that faint, dusty smell that never leaves the plains. I had just stepped toward the restroom when I heard a small voice to my left. A boy, maybe 10 years old, stood a few feet away, barefoot, his clothes plain and old-fashioned, though I didn't notice the strangeness of it at first. He asked me if I'd seen his mother. His voice was flat but polite, with that trembling edge you hear when a kid's trying not to cry. I remember saying no, I hadn't seen anyone, but I could help him look. I asked him where he'd last seen her, but when I glanced down, I saw his bare feet pressed into the dirt beside the pavement, yet they left nothing behind. Not a scuff, not a print, nothing at all. I stared for a second too long, and when I looked back up, his eyes were wide and dark, like he'd been waiting for me to notice. That was when the cold feeling slid into me, the kind that feels like your insides have dropped through the floor. Without saying anything else, I turned and walked back toward my car, trying not to break into a run. When I reached the door handle and looked back, the boy was gone. The lot was completely empty. No pickups at the far end. No faint outline of anyone standing beneath the buzzing lights. The whole place looked deserted, like I had dreamed him, but I hadn't. I could still hear his voice in my ears asking about his mother, soft and unsure, the way a real child would sound. I told myself I was tired, hallucinating from the road, but even as I sat behind the wheel, gripping it too tightly, the thought gnawed at me. I started the engine, the sound loud against the quiet, and pulled out faster than I should have. The rest stop vanished behind me in the rear view, swallowed by black highway. I couldn't let it go. The boy had been too detailed, too solid. His hair was sandy brown, sticking up a little, his shirt a pale blue button-up that looked like something a church choir might wear. I remembered the way the light hit his face, how his eyes seemed too dark against his skin. I remembered his small hands at his sides clenched like he was holding something in. None of that was the kind of thing your mind invents out of exhaustion. That night, I didn't stop driving until I reached the outskirts of Dallas, pulling into a motel where I left the TV on just to fill the room with noise. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw him standing under the light looking up at me. The next morning, the logical part of me wanted answers. I stopped at a gas station and asked the clerk if there had ever been anything strange about that rest stop near Abilene. He looked at me a long moment before saying, "Strange? You mean the stories about the kid?" He told me people had been talking about it for years. Truckers, travelers, even cops had claimed to see a boy wandering the lot at night. Some said he asked about his mother. Some said he just stood there watching. A few swore they saw him inside the restroom mirrors staring back at them. No one knew who he was. The stories always ended the same. He vanished before anyone could help him. I looked it up when I had the chance, and sure enough, there were old reports from the late 70s about a woman who'd gone missing near that same stretch of highway. Her car had been found at the rest stop, abandoned, the door open. She had a son with her. They never found either of them. People speculated she'd been taken, maybe killed, but no trace was ever found. The boy's name was listed as Daniel, age 10. The photo in the newspaper article showed a kid with sandy brown hair, wearing a pale shirt. His eyes in the picture were as dark as I remembered. After reading that, I swore I'd never stop at that place again. But last month I broke that promise. It was late and I thought I'd be fine if I didn't linger. Just pulled over for a minute to check the map on my phone. The rest stop looked the same as before, but more run down. The lights buzzing harder, the air colder. I kept the car running, locked the doors, and told myself I'd only be there for 60 seconds. But then I saw him, out by the restroom building just at the edge of the light, standing still as if waiting. He didn't come closer. He didn't wave or speak. He just watched, his head tilted slightly, and I swear the longer I looked, the more his shape blurred around the edges like heat haze over asphalt. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might stop. I pulled out without checking for traffic, tires squealing against the pavement, and when I glanced in the mirror, the lot was empty again. Since then, I've dreamed of him almost every night. Sometimes he's at the foot of my bed asking if I've seen his mother. Sometimes he's sitting in the back seat of my car silent, his bare feet not touching the floor. Once in the dream, he smiled and his teeth looked too sharp, too many. I wake up drenched in sweat, my chest tight, my heart hammering. It feels less like a nightmare and more like he's finding ways to follow me home. I don't stop at rest stops anymore. I don't even like driving through Abilene at night. But I can't shake the feeling that if I see him again, if I let him get close enough to touch me, I won't leave that place alive. Or worse, I'll leave, but I won't be me anymore. So if you're ever on that stretch of highway, and you see a boy standing barefoot under the buzzing lights, don't answer when he asks about his mother. Don't even look at him. Just keep driving, because once you see him, once you hear his voice, he doesn't let go. I was driving west out of Odessa just after midnight, the highway laid out like a black ribbon under the pale wash of the moon. The land was flat, endless, and silent except for the wind. I had been on the road for hours already, headlights carving a narrow cone of vision in front of me, and I was fighting the kind of fatigue that creeps up on you after miles of asphalt and the same dark horizon. That was when I noticed the glow of headlights in my rearview mirror, far off at first, then drawing closer. I thought nothing of it at the start. Out here it was normal to go 20-30 minutes without seeing another car. When I did, I almost welcomed it. But those headlights didn't just pass me. They slid up behind me and stuck there, hugging my bumper so close I couldn't even see the car itself. Just the piercing brightness in the mirror. I tapped the brakes lightly, a friendly warning, the way drivers do when someone's tailgating too hard. The headlights didn't flinch. I could feel the pressure of them, like whoever was behind the wheel was leaning into me on purpose. After a few minutes, I eased over onto the shoulder to let them by. The asphalt crunched under my tires, and I slowed almost to a crawl, waiting for the rush of a car sliding past. But nothing passed. The glow behind me shrank all at once, blinked, and was gone. My rear view showed nothing but black highway stretching back toward Odessa, unbroken and empty. I pulled over completely and killed the engine, stepping out into the dry Texas night. The silence was total, the kind that presses on your ears. No car, no fading taillights, not even the faint sound of an engine somewhere in the distance. Just the desert and the wind. I told myself maybe they had killed their lights as a prank, turned off down a side road I hadn't noticed. But the land here was flat and bare, no turnoffs for miles, nothing but mesquite brush and oil pumps silhouetted against the moon. I got back into my car, locked the doors, and sat there gripping the wheel harder than I should have. Eventually I started rolling again, headlights slicing the dark. The highway was mine alone for another 20 minutes before I saw them again. Same pair of lights, same steady creep into my mirror until they were right up on me. So close it felt like they could push me off the road. This time I didn't slow. I pressed harder on the gas, my engine groaning as the speedometer climbed. The lights behind me matched every move, never widening the gap, never falling back, just glued to me like a reflection. When I reached 90, they were still there, steady, unwavering. Then just as before, they blinked out. One instant blinding me in the mirror, the next instant gone. The desert felt even emptier after that. The road a void. I wasn't sure I wanted to keep driving. But what else was I supposed to do? Odessa was behind me, Midland up ahead, and I wasn't about to pull into some dark field just to wait for something I couldn't explain. I kept telling myself it was a trick of the eyes, fatigue playing games, maybe light refracting on the rear window. But a mile later, when my headlights brushed over an abandoned rest stop, I swear I saw a car parked there, old and sun-bleached, hood pointed toward the road. The paint was so faded it looked gray, windows black with dirt. I glanced at it only for a second as I passed, but in that second I could swear I saw someone sitting behind the wheel. Not moving, not watching the road, just sitting motionless. When I checked the mirror, the lot was empty again. By then I couldn't pretend I was imagining things. I could feel it in my gut, that primal warning that makes the hairs on your arms rise. I turned the radio on just to break the silence, but all I got was static, no matter how much I tuned. I left it low, a whisper of white noise, and pressed on. 10 minutes later, the headlights returned, brighter than ever, so close I thought I could feel the heat of them. My hands were slick on the wheel and every muscle in my body was tight. This time when I swerved toward the shoulder, the lights swerved too. When I tapped the brakes, they flashed brighter, like whoever was behind me wanted me to know they were still there. Then, as if mocking me, they faded again, swallowed by the night. Not switched off, not gone down another road, just erased. By the time I rolled into Midland, my nerves were shot. The streets were deserted, most of the town asleep. I found a gas station, lit up and empty, and pulled in under the fluorescent buzz of its lights. I stayed there longer than I needed to, pretending to check my tires, refilling the tank even though it was nearly full. The clerk inside watched me like I was strange, and maybe I was. I kept glancing at the highway, waiting for those headlights to reappear. When I finally convinced myself to keep driving, I stuck to the frontage roads, anything but the lonely stretch of I-20 where the thing had followed me. I didn't see the lights again that night, not in my mirror, not cresting a hill in the distance. But weeks later, when I drove back through the area in daylight, I pulled into that same rest stop. The lot was cracked, weeds bursting through, and the building itself was boarded up, windows smashed, graffiti scrawled across the brick. In the far corner, under the shadow of a leaning mesquite tree, sat a rusted-out car. It was the same one I had glimpsed before, gray and stripped bare as if it hadn't moved in decades. The interior was shredded, no seats left intact, no steering wheel, just an empty shell. But when I leaned closer, peering through the cracked windshield, I noticed the faint outline of handprints smeared across the inside of the glass, dozens of them pressed from within, some small, some large, some overlapping until they formed a blurred lattice of palms and fingers. My stomach knotted, and I backed away, too fast, tripping on the uneven pavement. When I got home, I tried to put it out of my mind, but the memory festered. Nights since then, when I drive long stretches of road, I still catch glimpses in my mirror. Sometimes it's a flash, sometimes just the impression of a glow, and every time I ease onto the shoulder to let it pass, I find myself staring at empty highway again. Nothing behind me, nothing ahead. Just the silence of Texas at night and the dread of knowing that whatever it is, it doesn't want to pass. It just wants to follow. I was driving west of El Paso late one night, the kind of black desert night where the horizon seemed to swallow everything except the sliver of highway under your headlights. The air was dry, hot even with the windows cracked, and the radio was dead with nothing but static from stations too far away. My eyes were heavy from hours on the road, and I was running on gas station coffee and a couple of stale burritos I'd regretted eating the second I'd pulled out of the lot. That part of Texas is so empty it feels like the world ended and nobody told you. Just mile after mile of flat desert, broken by scrub and the occasional jagged rise of rock. I remember the silence most. The oppressive, absolute kind of quiet you only get when you're hundreds of miles from anything living. Even the insects seemed to have disappeared. That was when I saw it. Up ahead on the right shoulder, my headlights fell on the body of a deer sprawled across the gravel. Its fur was matted with dust and one leg bent at an angle no natural creature could hold. I slowed instinctively, swerving left to give it space, though its body was still and lifeless. As I passed, the image of its glassy eye burned into my mind. But then in the rearview mirror, I saw movement. The deer stood. Not just stood, it rose awkwardly as though pushed up by something inside it. And then on unsteady legs, it balanced upright like a person. I almost ran off the road. My first thought was exhaustion, some trick of light and nerves, but the sight had been too clear, too solid. In the red glow of my taillights, I saw its long frame straighten, limbs shifting in jerky, unnatural motions. The head rolled to one side as though the neck had broken, and then, as if guided by some cruel puppet string, it turned and walked into the desert scrub, vanishing into shadow. I was gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles popped. The desert is unforgiving in its silence, and for the next mile I kept waiting to see lights behind me, a car, anything. But the road stayed empty. I told myself I needed sleep, that I'd pull into the next town for a motel. But part of me didn't want to stop. Stopping meant stepping into that darkness, the same darkness that thing had disappeared into. So I kept driving. 15 minutes later, a shape appeared again up ahead, another deer, lying on its side in the same lifeless sprawl, this one closer to the center of the shoulder, almost in my lane. I slowed, dread crawling up the back of my neck. When I passed, I forced myself not to look. But the temptation was stronger than fear. In the mirror, I saw the same impossible movement. The body rising, legs twisting as it forced itself upright. Again, it balanced on two legs. This time, it tilted its head upward, following my car with an uncanny stillness. Then it turned, slipping into the desert brush like smoke. The road stretched endlessly, my speed climbing with each sighting. My mind was racing with explanations, diseased animals, hallucinations, tricks of the headlights. But none of it felt right. There was something deliberate in the way they moved, the timing of their appearances, as if they were waiting. Then came the third. I spotted it from further away, sprawled across both lanes, its ribs rising and falling slowly, as though it was still alive. I slammed on the brakes, the tires screaming against the asphalt. The car skidded to a stop a few feet from the body. My heart thundered in my ears as I sat frozen, headlights illuminating the deer's twisted form. It wasn't breathing. It wasn't moving, just lying there. I honked, the sound ripping through the silence like a gunshot. The desert swallowed it whole, nothing. I decided to go around. As I edged the car to the shoulder, the deer's head snapped up. Its eyes glowed pale in the beam of the headlights, and then, in a grotesque shudder, it began to rise. Its legs cracked as they bent in ways they shouldn't, its chest caving slightly before snapping back outward. And slowly, carefully, it stood tall, higher than it had any right to, on two legs. The body stretched, the skin rippling like something was moving underneath. Its face remained the deer's, but slack and wrong, the jaw opening too wide, teeth grating against each other in the silence. Then it stepped forward toward my car. I threw the car into reverse, backing up with panic clawing at my throat. The creature took another step, each movement sharp and deliberate, like bones were being forced into positions they didn't belong. And then, as if deciding I wasn't worth the effort, it turned away, crossing into the desert and vanishing in seconds, leaving me staring at nothing but empty scrub. I didn't stop again until I reached El Paso just before dawn. I pulled into a motel, shaking, too wired to sleep. I sat on the bed staring at the beige curtains until the sun came up, telling myself that daylight would make sense of it. That it had been exhaustion, tricks of the eyes, maybe even some kind of sick dream behind the wheel. But the next morning, as I stepped out to leave, I saw something on the hood of my car. Thin, sharp indentations running parallel across the dust like fingers, 5 of them. Too long, too deep, pressed into the metal itself. I didn't drive home that day, and I don't think I'll ever drive that stretch of desert again. Highway 59 through the East Texas pine woods is the kind of stretch that makes you feel like you're driving into a black tunnel that never ends. The trees press right up to the edge of the asphalt, their branches reaching over like arms ready to pull you in. I had been on the road since dusk, heading south from Lufkin, and the dark had settled thick as tar around the car. My windows were up, the air conditioner running low, and the only sound was the hum of the tires and the low static of a radio station I couldn't quite tune in. That's when I heard it. At first it was faint, like someone in the far distance calling out. A woman, maybe, or a child, carried on the air. I thought it was a trick of my mind, the way the wind sometimes makes strange sounds when it cuts through pine needles, but then it sharpened. It grew louder, clearer, until there was no mistaking what it was. Screaming. Raw, human screaming. I snapped my eyes toward the tree line. Nothing but a blur of dark green trunks and the occasional glint of my headlights bouncing off a road sign. I rolled down the window just a crack, thinking maybe it was an animal, maybe some deer caught in barbed wire. But the sound didn't muffle when the glass was up. It was inside the car as much as outside, shrill enough to cut right through the sealed windows and fill my chest with a strange rattling dread. I turned up the radio, desperate for distraction. That's when the dash flickered. The dial glowed bright red for a split second, and the speakers erupted with hissing static. Beneath the static, I swore I heard the same scream layered in, distant, but there, woven into the interference like someone had been recorded dying and the tape kept looping. My hands were slick against the steering wheel. I pressed harder on the gas, trying to outrun whatever it was. But the screaming followed. It wasn't fading behind me with distance. It wasn't getting swallowed by the woods. Every half-mile marker I passed, it was still there, just as sharp, echoing off the glass like someone in the back seat was shrieking into my ear. I checked the rear-view mirror more times than I could count, but the road behind was empty. No headlights, no taillights ahead, just me and the endless strip of blacktop. For 10 miles straight, the sound never let up. It bent and twisted, sometimes high like a woman in pure terror, sometimes lower, guttural, almost like a man howling in pain. The cries bled together, overlapping, a whole chorus of agony carried with me. The strangest thing was how it seemed to sync with the car itself. When I slowed down slightly, the screaming stretched out, long and drawn, as if the pitch bent with the wheels. When I sped up, it rose higher, shriller, pressed tight against my skull until my teeth hurt. It was as if the sound wasn't coming from outside but being pulled along with me, trapped inside some pocket of air that clung to my car. My knuckles were white on the wheel when I saw the first sign for a rest area. Relief rushed through me. If I could just get out, just stand on solid ground, maybe the sound would stop. I pulled in fast, gravel crunching under my tires, headlights cutting across empty picnic tables and dark vending machines. The moment I shifted into park, the screaming stopped. Just silence, heavy and sudden, so loud in its absence it made my ears ring. I sat there gripping the wheel, my own breath ragged, waiting. The trees swayed gently, cicadas buzzed. The normal sounds of East Texas night crept back in. For a moment, I almost convinced myself I had hallucinated it, exhaustion twisting my senses, but then I glanced at the dash. The radio light was still glowing faint red even though the car was off and the needle was stuck between stations. A whisper of static bled through, too faint to be normal. I didn't wait around. I threw the car back into drive and sped out of that rest stop, like something was about to climb into the passenger seat. The rest of the trip down 59 was mercifully quiet. No screams, no flickering dash, just the ordinary lonely stretch of highway. But I can't drive it anymore without rolling the windows down and listening hard, wondering if I'll hear it again. The way it cut into me, sharp and merciless, I know it wasn't in my head. Some people say Highway 59 is cursed, that during the 60s there was a bus crash in those woods and the passengers burned alive before help could reach them. Others whisper about hitchhikers gone missing, truckers who pulled over and never turned their rigs back on. I don't know the truth, but I know what I heard. And sometimes, even when I'm nowhere near those woods, I wake in the middle of the night, sweating and shaking, because I swear I can still hear the screams threaded into the silence of my room, waiting for me to get back behind the wheel. I was driving north of Dallas one evening, a late return after dropping off parts for work. The road was quiet, stretched long and unbroken, the kind of Texas highway where the silence in your cabin feels like a second presence. It was around 11 at night, and the pine shadows bent with the wind as I pushed my truck along Highway 175. I wasn't speeding, wasn't even distracted. The night was just heavy and long, and I wanted to make it home before fatigue made me careless. That was when I saw the glow in my rearview mirror. Sudden and sharp, the unmistakable flash of red and blue lights cutting through the dark. A patrol car was behind me, steady and close, its lights blazing silently though no siren followed. My stomach dropped the way it always does when you see those lights, even when you know you've done nothing wrong. I signaled and pulled over, easing onto the shoulder where gravel cracked under my tires. The patrol car slowed behind me, then rolled to a stop with perfect alignment, headlights flooding my mirrors, the strobe still throwing frantic color over the blacktop and the trees. I cut the engine, rolled down my window and waited with my license already in hand. Only nobody got out. At first I thought maybe the officer was running my plates or waiting for backup, but a minute passed, then another. The lights pulsed without sound, red and blue washing over my dashboard in an unending rhythm. I leaned out of my window, squinting back at the cruiser, trying to see through the glare, but I couldn't make out a shape behind the wheel. The glass was too dark, the angle too sharp. I thought about getting out. But there's something drilled into you about staying put when law enforcement pulls you over. So I stayed. After a few more minutes, unease began to chew at the edges of my patience. I cracked open my door and stepped out, gravel crunching loud under my boots. The night air carried that cool bite of fall, the kind of air that makes sound travel strangely. I walked back slowly, hands visible at my sides, calling out a hesitant officer. Into the strobes, no answer. Just the wild shadows flickering over the trees as the light spun. When I got close enough to the driver's side, I realized the window was down. The inside was dark, too dark, as if the dashboard lights hadn't been switched on at all. I bent slightly, peering in. My heart went cold. There was nobody in the seat, nobody in the car at all. The cruiser sat there running, engine idling with a low growl but empty. The radio inside whispered faint static like a breath caught between words. The shotgun rack was bare. The dash camera light blinked faintly red, but the driver's seat and passenger side were vacant. I took a step back, every instinct telling me to run to my own truck and leave, but I couldn't. I was locked in place by the wrongness of it. Then the light stopped. Not faded, stopped. The engine cut in the same breath and the cruiser melted into the dark in front of my eyes. I don't mean it drove away. I mean the outlines of it dissolved, like fog breaking apart in the wind. The flood of white headlights vanished first, then the strobes, then the car itself until there was nothing left on the shoulder but gravel and silence. My knees nearly gave. I spun and stumbled back to my truck, fumbling for the handle with hands that wouldn't stay steady. Once inside, I locked the doors without thinking and turned the ignition. For a second, it refused to catch, the starter whining uselessly, and in that second I thought I was done. But then it caught, roaring alive, and I sped back onto the black ribbon of highway without daring a glance behind me. For 10 miles, my headlights carved tunnels through the night, the speedometer climbing higher than it should have. And I forced myself not to look at the mirrors. Still, I could feel the weight of something behind me, a presence as real as the pulse in my throat. When I finally glanced back, the rear view flickered with the faintest flash of red and blue, distant but following. My stomach dropped all over again. I didn't stop this time. I pressed harder on the gas, pushing past the speed limit, and the lights grew brighter. Closer, though again no siren wailed. My breath came in sharp bursts, the kind you can't slow even when you try. At last the highway curved, bringing me into the faint glow of a gas station ahead, the only splash of light in miles. I pulled in fast, tires squealing against concrete, and skidded to a halt under the buzzing canopy. I looked back, ready to see the cruiser rolling up behind me. There was nothing. Just the road, empty and black, stretching forever in both directions. I sat there with the engine still running, my chest tight, watching the highway in the mirrors and out the window, waiting for something to appear. A trucker pulled up to the other side of the pump, giving me a side eye as he stepped out. I almost wanted to ask him if he'd seen anything, but my throat locked. What was I supposed to say? That I'd been chased by a police car that wasn't real? Instead, I just filled my tank with shaking hands, trying to look normal under the fluorescent lights. When I went inside to pay, the cashier, a skinny man in his 20s with tired eyes, glanced at me and asked if I was all right. I muttered that I was fine, just a long drive. He nodded and said, "A lot of stories about this stretch. You probably saw one of those ghost cars folks around here talk about." I froze, wallet halfway out of my pocket, and asked what he meant. He shrugged, casual as if he were talking about the weather. "Trooper died out here a long time back, pursuit gone wrong. Folks say his cruiser still runs the roads at night. Pulls people over, then vanishes." He said it like it was a joke, but his eyes didn't hold much humor. "Lucky it just disappeared on you. Some folks say if you try to look too close, it don't let you go." I didn't sleep that night. Even when I got home, I left every light in the house burning and sat with my back against the wall, staring at my car keys on the counter like they might betray me. I haven't driven that stretch of highway since, but sometimes when I'm on any lonely road at night, I catch the flicker of red and blue behind me, just for a heartbeat, in places where there's no one else for miles. I never pull over anymore. I just keep driving, heart in my throat, praying that whatever is following me decides to let me go. I pulled off the highway a little after midnight, the road stretching empty and black behind me. The gas station was one of those old places with a single flickering light over the lot, a squat brick building with grime on the windows and a faded sign that just read "Fuel" in peeling red letters. I was low enough on gas that the warning light had been glowing for the last 10 miles, so even though the place looked abandoned, I didn't have much choice. My headlights swept across cracked asphalt, overgrown weeds along the curb, and the shadow of a single pump island standing crooked under the buzzing light. There wasn't another car in sight. No semis, no travelers, nothing moving except a moth or two circling the light fixture. I pulled up to the nearest pump, killed the engine, and stepped out. The night air was humid, the kind of sticky heaviness that clings to your skin. The station was silent except for the distant hum of the electrical box, and I remember thinking it felt like the kind of place you see in those true crime shows. The last spot someone's car was found before they disappeared. Still, the pump clicked on when I swiped my card. Relief cut through the unease, and I shoved the nozzle into the tank. That's when I noticed her. At the next pump over, just on the edge of the light, a woman was standing with her back to me. She wore a thin white blouse that clung to her, and her hair was long, dark, and dripping wet. Water dribbled down her shoulders, spotting her clothes, making little dark stains that spread as I watched. She didn't acknowledge me, didn't move except to lift the nozzle into her car. Her vehicle was a pale sedan I didn't recognize, older, with paint dull as bone under the light. For a second, I figured maybe she'd just washed her hair at home or been caught in some freak storm, but the sky was clear, and the road behind me had been bone dry for miles. The longer I looked, the stranger it seemed. Her posture was stiff, arms rigid as she pumped gas like she was forcing herself through the motion. I turned back to my own pump, trying not to stare. The silence pressed in. Even with both of us there, the lot felt deserted, hollow. I waited for the little click to signal my tank was full. It came sooner than I expected, sharp and final in the stillness. I pulled the nozzle free, and when I glanced back toward her, she was gone. No car, no woman, nothing. The only thing moving was the nozzle at the pump, swinging lazily back and forth as if she'd just let go of it a second before. Drops of gasoline pattered onto the concrete, sharp fumes rising in the air. I froze. My skin prickled all over. I hadn't heard an engine start, hadn't seen taillights pulling away, hadn't heard footsteps. The whole lot was open, flat with nowhere to hide. She should have still been there. I stood rooted for what felt like a long time, staring at that nozzle swinging like a pendulum. Finally, I shoved mine back into the cradle and climbed into my car, my hands trembling as I fumbled the keys. My headlights washed over the other pump one last time as I pulled out, and for the briefest moment I swore I saw wet footprints glistening on the pavement, leading away from the pump toward the dark stretch of woods behind the station. I drove faster than I should have down that empty road, checking my mirrors every few seconds. My heart didn't slow until the glow of that place was long behind me, swallowed in the distance. But even then I couldn't shake the smell of gasoline in my car, or the image of her soaked hair dripping steadily down her back, water pooling at her feet as if she'd just climbed out of a river no one could see. To this day, I never take that highway at night, and I never stop for gas past midnight, because I don't think she was ever meant to be there, not in the way you or I would be, and I can't help but wonder if next time, if I'm unlucky enough to see her again, she won't vanish before I can leave. I was driving home late one humid night, pushing through the endless stretch of concrete that bleeds out from Houston's sprawl, when I first saw the booth. It wasn't in a place where I expected it. I'd driven that route countless times, weaving past chemical plants with their stacks coughing fire into the sky, past overgrown drainage ditches and half-collapsed billboards for barbecue joints that had gone out of business a decade ago. I knew every exit and overpass along that stretch. So when the brake lights ahead of me started stacking up and I saw a pair of orange floodlights burning into the fog, I thought maybe there had been a wreck, but as the traffic thinned, I realized there wasn't a wreck at all. There was a toll booth, a lone one, sitting like a checkpoint to nowhere, straddling 3 narrow lanes. The sight of it unsettled me instantly. No signs, no lead-up. Just a concrete island where there had never been one before, manned by a single booth that looked like it had been dropped there overnight. I slowed and rolled forward. The glass was dirty, the overhead lights buzzing and flickering. A man sat inside, hunched over, his shoulders bent in a way that reminded me of an old scarecrow left too long in the field. His skin looked gray under the buzzing light. When I reached the front, he slid the glass halfway open with a slow, shaking hand. His eyes were pale, almost clouded, like someone half-blind. "Dollar," he said. His voice was cracked and dry but firm. I glanced around for signage, any indication of what this was for, but there was nothing. No cameras, no overhead sign flashing a toll amount. Not even the green arrows or red X's you'd expect above each lane. Just his hand, trembling but insistent, against my better judgment. I pulled a crumpled dollar bill from my console and handed it over. He pinched it between fingers that felt colder than they should have been through the brief brush, dropped it into a small wooden box instead of a cash drawer, and gave me a stiff nod. Then he waved me on. I drove through unsettled and tried to shake the feeling off. Maybe it was some temporary setup for roadwork, though I hadn't seen any cones or workers. Maybe I'd just been too tired to notice before. But the whole thing felt wrong. It stuck in my head all night, and the image of his pale eyes followed me into my dreams. By morning, I convinced myself I'd overreacted. To prove it to myself, I left early the next evening, took the same route back and looked for it. There was nothing. The road was open, 3 empty lanes stretching forward without obstruction. No orange lights, no booth, not even skid marks or gravel patches where construction might have been, just smooth concrete like it had always been. I slowed down, craning my neck, even pulling to the shoulder to double-check. But it was gone. A toll booth doesn't just vanish overnight. I thought maybe I'd turned down the wrong stretch of highway, so the next day I drove it again, this time in daylight. Still nothing. The more I searched, the more I realized I knew that road as well as the back of my hand, and I had not imagined it. But no matter how many times I tried, I never found the booth again. That should have been the end of it. Just some strange late-night hallucination caused by exhaustion and the hazy air rolling off the refineries. But the story didn't end there. A week later, I found the dollar bill I thought I'd paid. It wasn't in my wallet anymore. It was folded neatly in the glove box. My own handwriting was scrawled across it in jagged letters I didn't remember writing. 4 words. You came through here. The ink was fresh, dark black, as if I'd written it myself the night before. I tossed it out the window, more angry than afraid, trying to put the whole thing behind me. But I never really did, because after that, strange things started happening on that stretch of road. The first time I noticed the radio go silent. Not static, not a lost signal. Just silence, like someone had cut the cord. Then headlights behind me would appear where no car had been a second before, tailgating so close I could feel the heat of their lamps in my mirrors, only to vanish when I changed lanes. Once, when I glanced over my shoulder, I saw the faint outline of a booth in the median just for a split second, illuminated by the ghost of orange floodlights. And sometimes when I drove late, I swore I saw a figure on the shoulder, hunched and pale, watching me with those cloudy eyes. The worst was the night I nearly stopped. I had been driving home past midnight, bone-tired, when my headlights caught movement ahead. There, clear as day, was the toll booth again. Orange lights burning, the figure waiting inside. I gripped the wheel so hard my knuckles went white. My instinct told me not to slow, not to stop, not to even look too long. But as I passed, I caught the old man leaning forward, his hand pressed against the glass, his mouth moving in slow, deliberate words. I couldn't hear him, but I knew what he was mouthing. The same words I'd found written on that dollar. You came through here. I floored it, heart hammering, and didn't let off until the lights of Houston swallowed me. I told myself I'd never drive that stretch again. I kept to surface streets for weeks, even though it added an hour to my commute. But sooner or later you slip back into routine, and one night I took that road again. It was open, empty, quiet. No booth, no old man. Nothing but the same endless concrete. Except when I pulled into my driveway and killed the engine, I noticed something sitting neatly on the passenger seat. Another dollar bill folded tight. My hands shook as I unfolded it, half hoping it would be blank, but it wasn't. In the same jagged handwriting, it read, "Next time don't pass." And on the back, smeared like it had been dragged across wet ink, was the shape of a handprint, dark and greasy, smelling faintly of smoke and something else I still can't place. Something that clung to my fingers for days, no matter how many times I washed them. I don't drive that way anymore. I don't even live in Houston. But every so often when I pay for something in cash, the clerk hesitates, turns the bill over, and frowns, like they've seen something on it I can't. And once, not long ago, a cashier at a gas station handed my change back, stared straight at me with clouded eyes, and whispered in the same cracked, dry voice I thought I'd left behind, "You already paid." Crossing that bridge outside San Antonio, I had been half asleep, headlights glinting off the guardrails, country music low on the radio. The kind of drive where you don't think much, just let the hum of tires roll you forward. The night was heavy and damp, the kind of thick Texas humidity that makes the windshield slick even when it isn't raining. I'd been working late and the highway was mostly empty, a few 18-wheelers spaced out far in the distance. My eyes stung from fatigue, but I remember it clearly. Too clearly, because it wasn't the sort of thing a man forgets. Out of nowhere, something hit my windshield hard enough to rock the truck. The sound was sharp like talons on glass, a screech that cut through my chest. I snapped awake and saw wings enormous spreading across the glass like dark sails. The thing's face pressed against the windshield, and in that frozen second I swear to God it wasn't the face of a bird. It looked like a man's face, pale and twisted, lips pulled back in a scream, eyes round and black like a barn owl's, but too human, too knowing. Then it shrieked, a sound that made my skull ache, and just as I braked hard, swerving toward the shoulder, it was gone. No feathers, no blood, nothing. Just the wipers squealing across the glass and my own heart hammering. I sat there with the hazards flashing, trying to get my breath back. Every instinct told me to drive, keep moving. Don't look too long into the dark woods that lined the Guadalupe River beneath that bridge. But something else gnawed at me. Curiosity, or maybe that old stubbornness that makes a man not want to feel tricked. I got out, flashlight in hand, the night pressing against my ears. The air was thick with the smell of water and mud. The beam cut across the guardrail, the asphalt, the steel beams overhead. Nothing, no feathers, no claw marks, just silence. The silence was wrong. No crickets, no frogs, not even the distant rumble of trucks. Just my own boots scraping the concrete. I told myself it must have been an owl. A barred owl or great-horned, big birds plenty around here. Maybe I imagined the face, maybe the tired brain makes monsters out of shadows. I got back in the cab, locked the doors and drove. But the drive didn't feel the same. Every shadow off the trees looked like something waiting to step onto the road. The bridge behind me looked too far now, like I'd crossed into some place I shouldn't have. When I got home, I told myself to let it go. Sleep it off. But sleep didn't come easy. All night I kept hearing that screech, the sound of talons skittering across glass. I kept seeing those eyes, black and empty like holes. In the morning I went out to check the truck in daylight. Clean glass, no cracks. But there was something. On the hood, faint but real, were long scrapes. 3 on one side, 2 on the other, carved into the paint like it had been raked by something heavy. Not like a branch falling, not like anything mechanical. They were too deep, too straight. I touched them, my fingers fitting too neatly into the grooves. That wasn't my imagination. I didn't talk about it for a while. When I did, I brought it up in the garage with a couple of older guys who've worked those highways for decades. I said it casual, like a joke.
Ever hit an owl out on the bridge by the river?
One of them, a wiry man with tobacco-stained teeth, went quiet. He spit into a cup and said, "You mean the screech owl thing?" The way he said it, flat and final, made the room feel colder. Another guy laughed nervously, said, "Don't mess with that, man. That's a story people don't tell at night." But the wiry one didn't laugh. He leaned close, voice low. My cousin saw it years back. Bird with a man's face. It screamed at him, nearly made him wreck. Said it followed him, scratching at the windows. Next week he was dead. Car flipped off 281. Then he stood up, like he'd already said too much. I didn't believe him. I told myself it was just a story, just old men spinning yarns. But I started noticing things. Driving late at night, I'd see a shadow flicker across the windshield, though nothing passed overhead. Sometimes I'd hear a tapping on the glass, light but steady like claws. Once, heading out past Floresville, I heard the same shriek again, far off this time, but close enough to make my blood run cold. I pulled over under a streetlight, heart in my throat, waiting for it to hit me again. Nothing came. But when I finally got home and killed the headlights, I swear I saw something crouched in the oak tree near my yard. A shape too big to be a bird, wings folded, eyes catching the porch light. Watching. I started digging, not because I wanted to, but because once you've seen something like that, you can't not. Old legends, whispers about owls in Texas, witches that turned into birds, warnings about hearing them cry at night. The word lechuza kept coming up. Old Mexican stories about women who sold their souls, cursed to live as owls with human faces, screeching omens of death. People in South Texas say if you see one, it means someone close to you is going to die. Some say if you hear it cry, it's calling your name. I wanted to dismiss it as folklore, but that face pressed against my windshield hadn't been any animal I'd ever seen. 2 weeks later, it happened again. I was crossing another bridge, this one near Seguin, when the night went dead silent. I tightened my grip on the wheel, already knowing, and then it came. Out of the dark, wings spread wide, face slamming against the windshield just like before. This time I didn't brake. I kept driving, knuckles white, praying it would let go. It screeched louder than before, a sound that rattled in my chest and made my vision blur. Then it vanished. Not flew off, vanished. Like smoke in a gust. That night, my phone rang. It was my sister. She was crying. Our uncle had been in a wreck, head-on collision just outside San Antonio. They said he died instantly. The time of the crash? Right when that thing hit my windshield. Now I don't drive much at night. If I have to, I keep the radio loud, windows cracked, anything to remind me I'm still here. But even now, when the road cuts quiet and the trees loom close, I find myself looking at the sky, dreading the weight of wings across the glass. They say if you hear an owl cry 3 times, it means your death is near. I've heard it twice, and some nights when the air gets too still, I swear I can hear the faint scrape of talons on glass waiting for the third. The first thing that hit me when I woke up was the smell of diesel and cold grease. The truck stop was half lit, the kind of place where the fluorescent tubes buzz like hornets and flicker just enough to make you doubt your eyes. I'd pulled off the interstate near Midland after driving 10 hours straight from Fort Worth, thinking I'd catch a nap in the car before getting coffee and pushing on. The cab of my old Toyota was warm and close, windows fogged, and for a second I didn't know why I'd jolted awake. My neck hurt from the angle I'd been sleeping in, and my phone on the console showed it was just past 3 in the morning. I rubbed my eyes, then looked out through the windshield. That was when I saw them. At first it was like somebody had strung tiny red Christmas lights across the dark lot. Dozens of them scattered at different heights and distances. It took my brain a few seconds to realize they weren't lights. They were eyes. Small reflective pinpoints glowing red against the black like a field of coals. They weren't at the level of headlights or taillights. Some hovered low to the cracked pavement. Others were up near the roofs of the idling semis. None blinked. None moved. They just stared back at me. And as I focused, I realized there were far more than I first thought. My gut turned to ice water. I told myself it had to be some kind of optical trick. Animal eyes catching the light. Cats maybe. Coyotes. But coyotes don't come in dozens. And these weren't the pale green or amber reflections you see from critters. These were an unholy shade of red, like tail lights in fog. No tails, no bodies. Just eyes hanging there. My hand went to my keys automatically and I turned them in the ignition. The Toyota coughed, then started. The dashboard lights flicked on, and for an instant the glow of the eyes dimmed as if the light irritated them. I gripped the wheel, trying to slow my breathing. In the glow from my headlights I could see the lot stretching out, but the eyes didn't belong to any shape. I tried to focus on one pair and follow it down, but it just hung there in the dark air above the asphalt. I shifted into reverse and the brake lights lit up the lot. The eyes nearest to me all blinked off at once like someone cutting power to a grid, then blinked back on in new positions closer to my car. I jerked my head around, scanning the mirrors. There were no trucks moving, no people walking, just rows of silent semis and parked pickups. The gas pumps gleamed under weak yellow light and the door to the diner stood propped open. No one. It felt like I'd slipped out of the world. I shifted into drive and rolled forward. The eyes parted like a curtain just enough to let me through. I drove toward the edge of the lot where the access road met the interstate. My headlights swept across empty asphalt, but in the rear view the eyes followed, drifting closer to the car but never touching. They made no sound, not even the rustle of clothing or feathers or paws, just a horrible silence except for my engine. When I reached the exit, the stop sign stood crooked in the dirt. Beyond it was the on-ramp, a thin ribbon of black stretching toward nothing. The eyes were waiting there too, 2 deep rows lining each side of the ramp like some kind of grotesque honor guard. I stopped the car. My heart pounded in my throat. I rolled my window down just an inch. Cold night air spilled in, heavy with the smell of diesel and something sweet and rotten like syrup left out too long. I thought maybe I heard whispering, a low hiss that rose and fell like breath. It wasn't coming from my engine. It was outside from the direction of those eyes. I slammed the window back up. The Toyota's interior light came on for a second as the door seal caught, and in that momentary glow I caught a reflection in the rearview mirror that didn't belong to me. A face, white and thin with hollows where the nose and mouth should be, stretched across the entire back seat. Its eyes glowed the same red as the ones outside. My body locked up. I spun around, nothing, the back seat was empty. My own reflection stared back at me in the dark glass, mouth open. I faced forward again. The eyes along the ramp had begun to sway, not left or right but forward like they were leaning into the wind. My ears popped as though the pressure in the car had changed. The whispering outside became clearer, like 100 voices speaking my name under their breath. I floored the gas and shot up the ramp. The Toyota's tires squealed and the steering wheel fought me, but I kept my foot down. The eyes on either side flared brighter as I passed them. In the side windows I could see them rushing along parallel to me, keeping pace at impossible speed without bodies, just streaks of red light. The whispers rose into a single shriek that rattled the glass. When I hit the interstate, the eyes fell away all at once. The road opened in front of me like a black river. My speedometer crept past 90. My hands were slick with sweat and my vision tunneled. I didn't slow down for 20 miles. Finally, I took the first exit I saw and pulled into another gas station. This one brightly lit and full of cars. A man in a reflective vest was sweeping near the pumps. A couple of teenagers leaned against a soda machine laughing. Normal life. My engine idled rough as I sat there trembling. I checked the mirrors over and over, but the back seat stayed empty. I killed the ignition and climbed out. The cold air slapped me awake. For a second I thought maybe I'd dreamed it all. Highway hypnosis. Sleep deprivation. But when I looked at my car, I noticed faint smears on the windshield, like something had pressed oily fingertips against the glass in 24 places, leaving trails that led toward the driver's side. They were still damp, glistening faintly red in the station's lights. I wiped one with my thumb. It left a streak like watered-down blood, but smelled of nothing at all. I backed away from the car and stared at the highway in the distance. In the far dark where the asphalt disappeared toward Midland, tiny pinpricks of red light hovered just above the horizon, waiting. The night was black enough to smother every thought except the ones that came creeping in uninvited. I was driving Highway 190 east of Killeen, a stretch of road I'd taken plenty of times before, the kind that rolls through scrub brush and flat patches of Texas farmland, broken up by lonely gas stations and the glow of trailer porch lights in the distance. My clock read a little past midnight. It was the quiet part of the drive, the part where your headlights look like the only living thing around for miles. I had the windows cracked, just enough to let in a thread of night air, but mostly to keep me awake. Long hauls had a way of gnawing at your focus, and I had another hour to go before I hit where I was headed. The first thing I noticed was movement on the shoulder up ahead. Not a car, no flashers, nothing mechanical, just a person. I eased off, the gas slightly, squinting through the glare of my beams. It was a woman walking steady along the gravel. Her figure was pale in the glow, her clothes dark, her hair long enough to catch the wind. She didn't turn her head as I approached, just walked. It was strange, because there weren't any stalled vehicles in sight. Nothing but empty road, brush, and the shadows of mesquite trees hunched on the edges. As I drew even with her, something cut through the hum of my tires and the low drone of my radio. It was singing. Clear, delicate, a woman's voice threading into the night air like it had always been there. My window was only cracked, but it was sharp enough to hear. The hair on my arms rose at once. I glanced over. Her mouth was shut. I swear to God, her lips never moved. She just kept pacing that shoulder, her head tilted slightly down like she was watching her steps while that song spilled into the night from nowhere. I hit the gas harder than I meant to, and my truck jumped forward, carrying me past her. In my mirror, she was just a shrinking figure in the dark, but the voice followed, a few lingering notes riding in the cabin like they'd slipped under the door with me. Then it was gone. For a mile or two, I told myself I was tired. Long nights on the road can do that, make things out of shadows and half-dreams. But the sound wasn't like a hallucination. It was real, clear, as though she'd been sitting right there in the passenger seat. My chest wouldn't loosen. I wanted to crank the radio, shake it off, but I didn't. I kept thinking about how no car was around, no reason for her to be there, barefoot on gravel at midnight with no bag, no phone glowing in her hand, just a song. About 10 minutes down the line, my headlights caught another figure. My gut twisted even before the beams locked on. Same woman, same steady pace on the shoulder, walking against the wind of my truck. My foot froze. It wasn't possible. I hadn't turned off, hadn't crossed another road. It was the same stretch, only more of it empty. She didn't raise her head. The singing started again. This time I didn't look too long. My knuckles were white on the wheel as I passed, and again her mouth was closed. The song still spilled, in stronger, winding into the cabin like it belonged to the air itself. I accelerated harder, my tires chewing at the blacktop. In the mirror, she faded again, but my ears rang with it even after she was gone. I knew then that I wasn't tired. I was wide awake, more awake than I'd ever been, my blood buzzing sharp. Every nerve screamed wrong. I had the insane thought to call someone just to hear another human voice, but out here cell service was patchy, and the last thing I wanted was to stop. Stopping felt like a death sentence. The third time I saw her, I nearly drove off the road. She was ahead of me in the lane itself, standing dead center in the glow of my brights. Her hair hung over her face, strands matted and glinting with moisture, though the night was dry. Her arms were limp at her sides, and she was still singing. That voice came rolling out, stronger now, layered, as though there were more than one throat behind it. I slammed my brakes and swerved, skidding onto the shoulder gravel. When I looked up, the road was empty. No woman, just the hiss of my tires cooling and the faint song already fading. I sat there shaking, engine idling, my own breath loud in my ears. I told myself to turn around to head back west, but something in me knew I couldn't. This wasn't about a direction. This was something fixed, tied to me the second I heard it. So I pulled back onto the blacktop and pushed east, my lights tunneling into the dark. The road had gone strange. I recognized patches of it, sure, but others looked warped, bends sharper than they should be, fences gone where I knew they'd been. Once I swore I saw a set of headlights in the distance, but when I crested the hill, nothing. Just black and the steady line of reflectors stretching away. The song started again without warning. This time it wasn't outside. It was in the truck everywhere at once, like the speakers had come alive, though the radio was dead. It was louder, notes rising high and bending wrong like words caught in a storm. I shouted, slammed the radio buttons, but it didn't matter. The singing grew until it felt like the air itself was trembling. I tried to drown it by gunning the engine, but the noise only warped like she was matching me, pressing harder the faster I went. I could feel the pitch in my skull scraping down to the bone. When I finally snapped, I shouted into the empty cab, "What do you want?" My voice sounded small against it. The song stuttered for just a second, like a laugh tangled in melody. Then silence. My ears rang, aching in the sudden drop. I thought maybe it was over. Maybe I'd broken whatever loop I was in. I drove another mile, heart slowing, though my grip never eased. Then I saw her again. She was crouched on the shoulder, this time, both hands pressed into the gravel, hair draped over her face. When my beams touched her, she snapped her head up. Her eyes were wide and black, no whites at all, just voids. Her lips still didn't part. But I heard it again. That song rising high, cutting sharp into me, so close it felt like it was being poured directly into my chest. I swerved hard, nearly losing control, and when I steadied the wheel, she was gone. I don't remember much of the rest. Just patches, flashes. The lines on the road felt endless, like I wasn't moving at all. Sometimes I thought I saw her in the ditch, pacing me. Sometimes her reflection blinked in my side mirror, though nothing was behind me. Once the song came from the passenger seat, clear as if someone leaned close to my ear. By the time I hit Lampasas, the world felt thin, unreal. When I finally pulled into the lot of a 24-hour diner, my truck felt like it exhaled relief with me. I sat there a long time before forcing myself out, legs shaking. Inside, the fluorescent lights were harsh, the kind that showed every flaw, but I welcomed them. I sat at the counter and ordered coffee, though my throat was raw. The waitress, a woman in her 50s, gave me a sharp look. "You okay, hun?" she asked. I nodded, maybe too fast. She tilted her head. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I didn't tell her. What was I supposed to say? That I heard a woman singing on a highway where no one should have been, singing with a closed mouth and black eyes, a voice that kept following me mile after mile. She wouldn't believe me. Hell, I barely believed it myself. But here's the part I can't shake. When I paid and stepped back out into the lot, the night was quiet. My truck was waiting, ticking softly in the cooling dark. For a second, I felt safe. Then I heard it, clear as day. That voice. just a single line of song carried from somewhere I couldn't place, as though the night itself had leaned close to whisper it. My knees locked. I didn't drive straight home that night. I took back roads, wrong turns, anything to throw off whatever was tied to me. But even now, sometimes when I find myself alone on a stretch of highway, I swear I catch it again. The faint rise of a woman's voice, carried on the air, with no mouth to sing it. I was heading north out of Denton late one evening in early spring, the kind of night when the air is cool enough to mist against the windshield and the sky holds that faded, bruised shade of purple just before full darkness. My job had me on the road often, and I'd grown used to the stretches of empty highway, the smell of cattle somewhere beyond the tree line, the miles of cracked asphalt lined with flickering sodium lamps. This night felt like any other. I had the radio low, tuned to a local station fading in and out with static, and I was thinking about nothing much at all until I caught the faint glow of headlights in my rearview mirror. They were dim, yellowed with age and too low to be from anything modern. As the vehicle crested a rise and came into better view, I saw it clearly. An old green pickup, paint dull and mottled with rust, grille bent slightly inward, one of the front lights flickering weakly. It had the look of something dragged out of a barn after 20 years of sitting. I kept my speed steady at 65, expecting it to pass, but it didn't. The truck kept its distance at first, maybe 6 or 7 car lengths back, then slowly began closing the gap. I could make out the shape of the driver through the windshield, but not any details. Just a figure, hunched slightly, arms stiff on the wheel. My first thought was some rancher heading home, but something about it prickled the back of my neck. The way it held exactly to my speed. The way it stayed dead center in my rear view like a fixed point. I told myself not to be paranoid and turned the radio up a notch. 10 minutes passed, then 15. Each time I checked my mirror, that truck was there. I tried slowing slightly, it slowed. I sped up to nearly 75. The truck followed without hesitation, its engine sounding faint but strangely uneven like a mechanical wheeze, even through my rolled-up windows. The road was nearly empty, just a scattering of headlights far ahead and behind. It was the hour when everything thins out and you feel like you're moving through a tunnel of black. I reached for my phone at one point to check for a signal, but the bars had dropped to 1. A low patch of fog rolled across the road, the kind that clings to the ground in ragged bands. My taillights cast a red glow into it, and for a moment the pickup disappeared in the mist. When it emerged again, it was closer, maybe 2 car lengths now. My pulse quickened. I could see the front bumper caked with some dark substance and the cracked glass of its headlights. The driver's shape was clearer but still featureless like a cutout. I could tell whoever it was wasn't leaning forward or looking around, just staring straight ahead at me. I took the next turnoff without signaling, a sharp exit toward a service road lined with a few darkened businesses and gas stations. If the truck was just some random driver, it would continue straight. It didn't. It swung off behind me with a lurch, tires squealing faintly on the pavement. I gripped the wheel tighter and muttered something under my breath. The road here was even emptier. No streetlights, just the reflection of my own beams off old metal signs. I thought about calling the police, but with no real emergency to report. What would I say? Some old truck is following me. Wouldn't get much more than a shrug. Another 5 minutes and I saw a diner up ahead. One of those 24-hour places with a glowing red neon sign flickering half dead. The parking lot held a handful of cars and an old bus. Relief washed through me at the sight of lights and people. I pulled in fast, swinging around to park near the door. In my mirror, the truck slowed at the entrance, idled for a moment, then turned in as well. My heart hammered. I shut off the engine, grabbed my bag, and got out, moving quickly toward the diner door. The bell above the door jingled and the smell of fried food and coffee hit me. Inside, a few people sat at the counter, a couple of truckers at a booth, a waitress wiping down tables. I glanced back through the glass, expecting to see the truck pulling up right behind mine. The lot was empty except for my car and the other customers' vehicles. The old green pickup was gone, not pulling out onto the road, not parked anywhere, just gone. I told myself maybe it had kept driving or turned off behind the diner, but something in me knew that wasn't right. I walked to the counter, trying not to look shaken, and ordered coffee. The waitress, a woman in her 40s with tired eyes, poured it and asked if I was okay. I hesitated, then said, "You didn't see an old green truck pull in after me, did you? Rusty kind of beat up?" She frowned. "Honey, you're the only one who came in just now." I gestured toward the lot. "No, it was right behind me. Pulled into the entrance. You didn't hear it?" One of the truckers at the booth, a heavy-set guy with a cap pulled low, looked up at me. "Old green pickup?" he said slowly. "Rust all down the sides?" "Yeah," I said. "You saw it?" He glanced at the other man across from him, then back at me. "Nobody drives that truck anymore." The other trucker gave a small laugh without humor. "Been stories about that thing for years. Shows up on 35 on 77 out here sometimes. Follows folks late at night. People say it's a farmer who died in a wreck back in the 70s. Supposed to be looking for his kid or something." "That's," I started, then stopped. My hands felt clammy around the coffee mug. The waitress shook her head. "Every few months someone comes in asking about that truck. Always the same description. Always gone by the time they check the lot." "You're not the first." I turned in my stool and looked back out the window. The lot was still empty. But in the reflection of the glass, just for a heartbeat, I thought I saw the faint glow of two dim yellow headlights hanging behind me like eyes in the dark. When I blinked, they were gone. I didn't finish the coffee. I left a bill on the counter, walked out to my car, and sat there with the engine running, watching the road. The night was silent except for the hiss of tires far away. I waited, thinking maybe the truck would materialize again, but nothing moved. When I finally drove off, my headlights cut through another band of fog curling low over the asphalt. And there, in the thin, shifting mist, I thought I saw a shape moving at the edge of the beams, an outline of a cab and hood keeping perfect pace with me. Silent, just a ghostly shadow riding my flank. My hands tightened on the wheel and I kept driving north, afraid to look in the mirror, afraid of what might still be behind me. The bridge outside Corpus Christi always looked older than it should have, a narrow span of steel that arched over the black water like some relic no one bothered to replace. I'd taken it dozens of times before, usually without thinking much about it. That night, though, it was past 11, and I had been driving for hours trying to get home after visiting a cousin. The highway lights thinned the closer I got to the coast, and by the time I rolled onto the bridge, it felt like the world had narrowed to two bright cones from my headlights and the metal grating beneath my tires. The sound was hollow, a sort of low vibrating rattle that made the steering wheel hum in my hands. I remember how the air smelled, briny and heavy, with a faint chemical sharpness, like tar and rust. The tide was out, leaving dark stretches of sand beneath the bridge, slick with stranded seaweed. Halfway across, my headlights flickered just once like a bulb about to burn out. I instinctively tapped the dashboard, though I knew that wouldn't do anything. When the beam steadied again, I checked my rearview mirror and froze. There was no bridge behind me. Where the lattice of steel girders should have stretched back into the night, there was nothing but flat water, dull and rippling under the moon. I slowed, convinced my eyes were playing tricks on me. But the mirror showed the same thing. My taillights glowed over the water with no road, no steel arches, no sign of the path I'd already driven. I twisted in my seat, craning to look out the back window. My stomach dropped. There was only the black gulf stretching to the horizon. The tires still thumped beneath me, still caught the metal seams and rattled just as they had when I first entered. But the sight behind me was wrong. I pressed the gas a little harder, desperate to make it to the other side. My hands slicked on the wheel, sweat gathering in my palms, though the air in the cab felt suddenly cold. Every instinct told me not to stop, not to test whatever trick was unfolding. Then the radio hissed. I hadn't even turned it on. The knob was all the way down, but static poured through the speakers anyway, thin and wet, like the sound of something breathing through water. It rose and fell, grew sharp, then dissolved again like whispers pulled under the tide. I fumbled to shut it off, slamming the dial with the heel of my hand, but the sound kept seeping through. I wanted to roll down the window, but some part of me was afraid that if I opened anything, even a crack, the sound might spill inside me like seawater flooding a hull. I focused ahead. The far end of the bridge was there, faint in the distance, street lamps casting weak yellow pools on the asphalt. But every time I drew closer, it seemed to stretch farther away, as if the road was lengthening itself, pulling me deeper over the water. I glanced back again, hoping the bridge had reappeared. It hadn't. The gulf glittered, endless and black, and the static in the cab rose to a shrill note that pierced my skull. Something moved on the passenger side window, At first I thought it was condensation, a trick of the light, but the shape dragged against the glass like a pale hand, slick and long-fingered, trailing from the bottom up. The hand smeared water that wasn't there, leaving streaks like salt. My breath hitched. I pressed the pedal down harder, the speedometer climbing, the steel beneath me roaring as the tires gripped the grated deck. The smear grew, stretched until a face pressed itself to the glass. Skin gray-white, eyes black and sunken, a mouth that never opened but widened into an impossible curve like a split in the flesh. The thing slid along the side of my truck as though it were swimming beside me, keeping pace no matter how fast I went. The road ahead finally stopped stretching. The lights of the mainland came into view, steady, real. I could see the asphalt connecting back to the coast, a familiar rest stop sign glinting on the shoulder. Relief crashed over me so hard I almost sobbed. I gripped the wheel and barreled forward, not daring to look at the thing clinging to my side. The static shrieked so loud I thought the speakers would burst. At the last second, the headlights flashed again and I shot off the bridge onto solid ground. The sound cut out. The cab went dead silent except for my ragged breathing. My mirrors showed nothing but the highway behind me, stretching clean and dry. No water, no bridge, just asphalt vanishing into the dark. My truck rattled as if nothing had happened. I pulled into the rest stop and killed the engine, shaking too hard to hold the keys steady. The world felt normal again. Cars passed on the highway and a semi rumbled into the lot. But when I stepped out, the air carried that same briny rot, thick as if the tide had followed me. I looked back at the stretch I had just crossed. There was no bridge there anymore, just the highway meeting the land without interruption like it had always been. I don't take that route anymore. I drive an extra hour inland, skirting the coast entirely, even if it adds miles to the trip. Because that night something followed me back from the water. Sometimes when the road is quiet and the radio should be dead, I still hear it. The faint hiss of static, the thin scrape of a hand against glass, the sound of something pressing its face just out of sight, waiting for me to cross another bridge. I was on the long stretch of highway south of Laredo, that endless desert road where the horizon melts into the mirage and the night seems to fall heavier than anywhere else in Texas. I'd been driving since San Antonio, the sort of restless drive where you don't bother with music or radio, just the low hum of tires on asphalt and your mind wandering too far into shadows. I wasn't tired yet, but I felt the peculiar unease of being too alone, too far from anything resembling life. The desert has a way of reminding you how small you are. Out there, a broken-down car could mean you were nothing but a pile of bones for coyotes before help came. The sign appeared without warning. A bright green reflective sheet catching my headlights, standing tall on the right side of the highway. Route 666. Bold white letters and numbers with that highway shield shape etched sharp against the green. I slowed instinctively, squinting at it because it didn't belong. I knew every major route in Texas, at least down here. I'd passed dozens of signs already. US 83, I-35, the farm-to-market numbers. But there was no 666, not in this state. The thing was brand new, not sun-faded, not riddled with bullet holes like most rural signs out here. It looked freshly planted, the metal shining faintly in the glare, as if someone had installed it yesterday. I drove past, trying to shake it off, but the numbers stuck. They stuck in that primal, unsettling way that makes the hair along your arms stand up. 666. My grandmother used to whisper about it when I was a kid, warning us about things marked with that number. The Devil's Highway, she called it. When I was younger, I'd laugh, chalking it up to superstition born out of church sermons and Mexican folklore. But in that empty desert alone, the number didn't feel funny at all. A mile down, I realized something stranger. I hadn't passed another sign. No mileage markers, no junction announcements, no town names. The desert just stretched and stretched, and the road narrowed slightly, though I couldn't say when it started to feel tighter. My GPS had lost its signal 20 minutes back, so I had no point of reference except the dashed lines whipping beneath my headlights. The sense of being swallowed crept in, like the highway had turned into a tunnel with no walls, only endless black. I turned on the high beams, hoping to push the dark back. That's when I saw the second sign. This one wasn't green. It was white, almost luminous, like it had been dipped in lime. The same bold letters, Route 666. This time with an arrow pointing right into a road I swore hadn't existed seconds before. I slowed hard, heart thudding, staring at that side road. It was narrow, blacktop cracked and bleeding weeds through the surface, yet it looked driven. Fresh tire marks streaked across it. My first instinct was to keep going straight, to pretend I never saw it. But when I checked my mirror, something cold washed through me. There was no road behind me. Just blackness. No taillights from other cars. No glow from distant towns, not even the faint outline of asphalt stretching back. My headlights didn't illuminate anything in the rear view. It was like the highway had vanished the second I passed the sign. Panic flickered in me. I pulled over, engine idling loud against the silence. The desert had gone too quiet even for the dead hours of night. Usually you'd hear something. The faint rustle of wind, an owl, the groan of heat escaping cracked earth. But it was nothing, like the world had muted itself. I killed the engine to test it, and the silence was unbearable. I swear I could hear my pulse thudding in my throat. The green sign behind me was gone. Where it had stood was now only emptiness. My choices narrowed to forward or right, but forward stretched into a dark so thick it almost looked solid. And the right-hand road at least felt tangible. Against everything in me, I turned the wheel and eased onto Route 666. The change was instant. The surface felt rougher, like driving on gravel, though the road was paved. My headlights didn't reach far, maybe 20 feet, and beyond that the night pressed in heavy. The tire marks grew clearer, darker, as if dozens of cars had passed before me. Yet there were no lights ahead, no sounds of other engines. Only mine, groaning louder with each mile. After 10 minutes, I noticed the signs again. This time they came closer, almost every few hundred feet. Each one marked Route 666, arrows bending me deeper into turns I didn't remember making. Sometimes the signs leaned crooked as though slammed into the ground hastily. Others were riddled with gouges as if clawed or carved. They grew more distorted the farther I went. Numbers slashed through, twisted, melting shapes, but always sixes. My hands slicked on the wheel, sweat dripping though the AC was blasting cold. Then the road widened. My beams caught something in the distance, a glow faint as fireflies. I pressed on, clinging to the idea of light meaning civilization. But as the glow sharpened, I saw it was another sign, bigger, taller, towering over the road like a billboard. It read, Route 666 in letters that stretched unnaturally long, each six bending downward like hooks. The glow wasn't reflection. The letters themselves burned, faintly red, as if lit from inside. Beneath the sign, parked crooked across the blacktop, was a car. An old Chevy sedan, doors flung open, headlights dead. My stomach dropped when I passed it because I saw the inside. The upholstery was ripped and blackened like it had been torched, but no fire damage outside. Just the inside, melted plastic and scorched cloth. And on the steering wheel, faint in the light, were scratches. Deep gouges in the shape of 3 numbers, carved messy but deliberate. Second, I sped up then, panic clawing. My gut screamed to turn around, to find any way back. But when I swung the wheel, the road behind me was gone again. Nothing but blackness swallowing my high beams. I drove harder, 30, 40, 60 miles an hour, tires squealing. The signs whipped past faster, some glowing, some bent, some broken, but all pointing ahead. That's when I saw the first figure, a man standing at the shoulder. His clothes were torn, face hidden in shadow, but he raised an arm as if to wave me down. I swerved, nearly losing control, but in the mirror there was nothing. Another figure appeared, then another. A woman in a long dress dragging something heavy behind her, a child clutching a stuffed toy with its head torn off. More and more of them lining the road, watching, none moving but their heads turning as I passed. My breath came sharp and shallow, every nerve screaming. Then the road dead-ended. I slammed the brakes so hard the car fishtailed, skidding to a stop before a wall of desert rock that hadn't been there seconds before. No turnoffs, no exits, just stone blocking the way. The signs had led me straight into it. In the headlights, dozens of them were nailed to the rock. Route 666 stacked over and over, some upside down, some with letters melting, some painted with dripping black stains I prayed weren't blood. My engine died without me touching the key. The lights flickered and cut, and in the silence I finally heard something again, a whisper. Low, countless voices overlapping, all murmuring numbers in unison. 666 over and over. The sound growing, echoing from the rock, from the road, from inside the car itself. My skin crawled, every hair bristling as the voices rose into a scream. The rearview mirror caught my eyes then, and I wished I'd never looked. The back seat wasn't empty anymore. I don't remember getting out or if I ever did. I only remember the last sight before everything collapsed into dark. The road sign, burning bright against the desert, its numbers twisting like serpents, and the shadow in the mirror leaning closer, until its breath crawled across my neck, and when I woke, if I woke, I was driving again. Somewhere outside Laredo, the desert stretched endless and quiet. And then just ahead, my headlights caught the glint of green metal, a road sign, Route 666. I was driving east of Tyler late one October night, the kind of night when the air feels damp and heavy, carrying the smell of pine and rain-soaked earth from the woods along Highway 31. I'd been on the road for hours after finishing a late shift at a job site outside Dallas. My old Ford Fusion hummed steadily, headlights cutting a pale tunnel through the dark. The road was nearly empty except for the occasional 18-wheeler barreling past in the opposite lane. I was tired but awake enough. Window cracked to let the cool air in, country radio murmuring at low volume. It was one of those stretches where every mile looks the same. Flat asphalt flanked by dark trees, and you start to feel like you're not moving at all. I adjusted the rearview mirror absent-mindedly as I slowed for a bend. At first I thought the reflection was a trick of the dim dome light or some leftover streak on the glass, but then my stomach went cold. In the rearview, a woman was sitting in the back seat. She was leaning slightly to the side, as if she'd slid into the car unnoticed, her face pale and her hair hanging in dark, wet strands like she'd been caught in rain. She smiled faintly, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile you might see on someone caught doing something they shouldn't, thin and off-center, holding too long. My heart thumped hard and I whipped my head around, the whole car shifting as my hands jerked the wheel. Nothing. The back seat was empty. I took a deep breath, wiped my palms on my jeans, and looked back at the mirror. She was still there. Same smile, same wet hair plastered to her face. I could even make out her eyes now, wide and glinting like small coins in the glow from the dash. I felt my throat tighten. I didn't know if I was dreaming, losing it from fatigue, or actually seeing something real. I reached a hand behind me, patting the seat, but my fingers met nothing but cold fabric. The mirror still showed her sitting upright. I slowed down, thinking I'd pull over. There was a gas station about 3 miles ahead. I remembered passing it before. But as I hit the brakes, her expression changed. It didn't move like a normal person's would. It just shifted all at once, like a flicker in a film. Her mouth opened into a grin too wide, teeth catching the glow of the dash. Her hair lifted slightly, though there was no wind. I kept my eyes on the road but couldn't stop glancing up at the mirror. She tilted her head as if she knew I was looking at her and wanted me to keep looking. The woods outside blurred into a solid black mass. I turned the radio off, the silence in the car roaring in my ears. I tried to rationalize it. Sleep deprivation, some weird optical illusion. But my hands were trembling so badly the steering wheel shook. I thought about calling someone, but my phone was in the console and I didn't want to break eye contact with the road. As I passed a faded sign for a county road, the temperature in the car dropped like someone had opened a freezer. The air smelled faintly of stagnant water, like a lake in the heat of summer. Then she leaned forward. In the mirror, her face moved closer to mine, but when I whipped around again, the seat behind me was still empty. My heart hammered so loud I could hear it over the tires. I pressed my foot harder on the gas without realizing it, the car creeping up to 80. My chest felt tight, like the air was getting thinner. I thought if I could just make it to the gas station, there'd be people there, someone to break this spell. But the mile markers kept going, and the gas station never appeared. I glanced at the mirror again and almost veered off the road. She was now inches from the back of my head, her face clear in the dim light. Her skin was ashy, her eyes too dark, her teeth small and sharp, and her grin stretched like a wound. I smelled something then, a faint sweetness mixed with decay, and my stomach lurched. I shouted out loud, a raw sound I barely recognized, and slammed the brakes. The car skidded to the side of the road, tires crunching gravel. I turned around fully this time, gripping the headrest, but the back seat was empty. The car interior was silent except for my ragged breathing. My hands shook so violently I dropped them into my lap and forced myself to inhale, to calm down. The dashboard clock blinked 1:37 a.m. The road outside was deserted, the trees whispering with the night wind. Then the back door lock clicked. Just once, sharp and mechanical. I froze. The smell of stagnant water grew stronger. The rearview mirror showed nothing now but my own pale face, eyes wide. I reached for the ignition, desperate to drive, but my hand stopped midair. From somewhere just behind my seat, close enough I could feel the air shift, a voice whispered my name. I spun around, but there was only darkness. The window glass was fogged, though it had been clear moments before. A faint outline pressed against the rear door from the inside, like a handprint left on a shower door. The lock clicked again. This time it stayed down. My pulse thudded in my temples. I shoved the car into drive and stomped the gas. The tires squealed and the car lurched forward. The reflection in the mirror flickered and she was back, sitting calmly, hands folded in her lap, smiling that same wet smile. Her head tilted as if she were curious. The road stretched ahead endlessly. No signs, no exits, just black trees and the faint yellow of my headlights. I drove faster, but the faster I drove, the further away everything seemed. Her smile widened until it wasn't a smile anymore, but a bared teeth grimace. Her eyes locked on mine in the mirror and my vision blurred. I felt like I was falling forward, though my hands still clutched the wheel. The radio came on by itself, static hissing, and beneath it a low laugh. The same voice that had whispered my name. Then the car's engine sputtered and died, coasting to a stop on the shoulder. The lights went out. The night pressed in thick and total. I couldn't see her in the mirror anymore, but I could feel her there. The back seat creaked softly as if someone shifted their weight. The smell of stagnant water filled my mouth like a taste. I reached for the door handle, ready to throw myself out into the dark, but before I touched it, something cold and wet brushed the back of my neck. My breath caught in my throat. In the dead silence, just before everything went black, the voice whispered again, closer this time, almost gentle. "Don't look back." Eastbound on I-10, a man in a cowboy hat crossed the road. His boots scraped asphalt but left no sound, no shadow, and no feet beneath the cuffs. I saw him first as a pale stitch in the beam wash, a stitched silhouette moving with the sure rhythm of someone who owned the night and everything running through it. The highway was a dark river with the hills folded around it, dry grasses ticking in a wind I could feel through the cracked window. When he stepped into the lane, I eased my foot off the gas and put my hand to the horn, then stopped myself. I already knew the horn would not change anything. It felt like trying to shout at a dream. He crossed at a steady angle, never hurrying, never glancing my way. The brim of the hat hid his face, and there was that yawning wrongness where the cuffs hung loose over black air. I wanted to hear the grind of leather, the slap of a heel, any ordinary noise that would return the world to itself. But the road held its breath like a pool with something heavy at the bottom. My headlights broke around him and rejoined as if they had flowed past a post set in the current. Then he was gone into the median and the scrub and the wider dark beyond. My knuckles buzzed on the wheel. I let the cruise control pull me back to speed and watched the gauges as if the needles might twitch and spell out plain words. There was nothing, just the steady slide of numbers. Somewhere behind me a truck should have been roaring up. A radio should have thrown a country song through the night. A coyote should have cut loose from the hills, and none of it came. I drove in what felt like the breath between a word and its echo. I tell myself I'm not superstitious. I am the type who changes a belt by the side of the road with a headlamp and a prayer to no one, who carries a gallon of water when I cross the long stretches, who does not believe in warnings that come out of nowhere. I had a delivery to San Antonio, a crate of smoke detectors from a vendor in El Paso who promised me cash on Saturday if I got them to the warehouse by dawn. The cab smelled like sunflower seeds and warm dust. The dash rattled at 70 and quieted at 75. I had been through this cut of Texas for years and knew the names of towns by the way the road rose and fell before I ever saw the sign. Tonight the land felt mislaid, shoved half a mile to the left, familiar and wrong in the same breath. 10 minutes, maybe 20 after the man crossed, I looked into the rear view and saw him behind me, dead center between the broken white lines, not sprinting, not lagging, just keeping pace with the truck, his empty cuffs swinging, the hat brim carved like a crescent. He stayed where he was no matter how the speedometer slid. If I gained, he drifted forward through a darkness that did not seem to care about wind or distance. If I let the truck roll down to 60, he matched that too, held at the same small size in the mirror, a figure stamped onto glass. I swallowed twice and felt my mouth go dry anyway. I tapped the brake and then, angry at my own fear, jabbed the accelerator. The motor groaned, the mirror filled with bouncing highway light. He never shrank. It was a game you could lose by noticing you were playing it. I turned up the radio and thumbed the scan, but the dial rolled across dead air, station after station, of the kind of quiet that makes your ears want to invent something to fill it. I thought of calling someone, just to hear a human voice snap the thread. I had no one awake at that hour who wouldn't think I'd been drinking. The last time I had called my ex, I could hear dishes being put away while I tried to talk about a bad night on the road, and my own voice sounded like a stranger's in my ear. I let the phone sit screen down in the cup holder and went back to the game of pretending I had not seen what was real in the mirror. The edge slide of the shoulder drew my attention before I registered the flashing glow. A rest area sign came, up green and white, then the short pines that clung to the slopes, then the sleeved lamps in the lot. Against everything that told me not to, I took the exit. The truck dipped off the smooth ribbon to the curved slip and rolled into empty concrete under light that looked bruised and tired. I parked under the nearest pole, angle perfect, and killed the engine. The night ran back into the space the engine had filled, and the quiet climbed in beside me. My head soaked it up like a dry sponge. It felt like when you are a kid, and you walk into a church and do not know why your body decides to be careful. I told myself, get out, stretch your legs, splash water on your face. I told myself, if he is behind you on that road, he can stay there. The cab door opened with a pop. The air smelled like creosote and old heat. I stepped down and had the oddest sensation that my boot soles were hovering half an inch above the concrete. It passed with the weight of me. I stood and listened. The lamps hummed but made no sound. The little metal signs that usually clack on their chains hung still, as if they had been painted onto the poles. From the far edge of the lot came the figure of a woman. She walked with her hands tucked into the pockets of a canvas jacket, head down, moving along the curb as if she were counting the concrete squares. For a second, the relief hit me hard enough to make me lightheaded. You can make a fool of yourself, alone in a truck cab, but you cannot lie to another person's eyes. I stood by the bumper and watched her approach. When she was close enough that I could see the white seam at the edge of her pocket and the chip on her front tooth, she lifted her head. "You saw him," she said. The words knocked a breath out. Of me. Not because of what they meant, but because she had spoken at all and the air refused to carry it. Her mouth moved and the sense of the words was in my head, yet there was still that dead muffle around us as if a blanket had been pulled over the world. She looked past me into the mirror sheen of the truck's dark window. "The one with the hat," she added. "The one with the boots that don't land. Who are you?" My voice felt like a dropped tool. It fell and did not echo. "Who are you? And what is this?" She smiled in a way that belonged to someone who had smiled before she was ready. It moved her mouth but not her eyes. "I sit at the westbound table," she said, as if that answered anything. She nodded toward the picnic area under the pines where concrete tables sat like low tombs. "A long time I sat?" "He told me to. You got lucky. He likes the eastbound road these days." Cold crept under my collar, though the air had not changed. "What is he?" I asked that, she said. "When he first stepped out," I asked. "He did not say. He told me to sit and wait, and when the shadows hit the end of that table, he walked away. He likes the line, I think, the line between shadow and day." Her jacket was zipped to the top but hung loose. Her wrists were thin enough to look breakable. She could have been 35 or 50. Her hair was tucked back under a cap with a feed store logo. The bill pinched from where fingers had pressed it again and again. "Did you try to leave?" I asked. "I did," she said. "You can try. He does not always stop you. Sometimes he does not need to. Sometimes you stop yourself and do not know why." I told myself to get back in the truck. The absurdity of standing in an emptied-out rest area, talking to a woman whose words simply arrived without moving air, pushed its way through my fear and asked me what any of this could possibly change. If I left, I would see him again in the mirror. If I stayed, I would sit at a table and watch the shadows slide. That felt like the heart of it. It felt like the night wanted me where it wanted me, Not in any place of my choosing. Do you want a drink? I said, because it seemed like a human thing and because I had no other line to throw. Water or soda. She blinked twice, as if the idea of wanting was a muscle she had let go slack. I would like to put my feet on a rug, she said. One of those sink rugs in a kitchen, a blue one. If I could imagine it right, I'd like that, but here I hold my place. You can leave, I said, and even I did not believe me. The tables keep us sitting, she said. The lanes keep us walking. If we are still, we wait. If we move, we do it in the same line he keeps. You saw him, and now he knows your pace. He learned mine the night my car quit on the shoulder and I ran to the call box. I do not even remember the car quitting anymore. I remember him stepping out and the way the brim hid everything. He did not have feet, but that is nothing compared to the part where the sound does not touch him. She tucked her hands deeper in her pockets as if a cold wind had found her. Her teeth flashed and disappeared with a quick shake of her head. You should go, she said. He likes new ones to move. If you stay too long, he will give you a table. I went back to the cab because you do what you are told when something in you recognizes a rule that predates whatever you can name. The door closed and felt like a lid settling. The key rolled. The engine woke and hummed into that blanket of dead air, and for a second it felt normal enough that I almost laughed. I looked once more at the woman. She had returned to the curb. She was tracing the concrete squares again, hands in her pockets, head down, moving as if each seam mattered. By the time I hit the merge, I was already watching the mirror. The beam stretched ahead, silver as frost, and on the glass hung the man, bracketed by lane markings like a portrait in a cheap frame. His hat brim sat level as a spirit level. His cuff stirred at nothing. I gripped the wheel and let the tire hum pull me back into the tunnel. The green signs were blank again, white letters wiped away by the same slow eraser, then not even blank, just panels that looked like rows of salt. I drove through a series of hills that should have led me past Kerrville and Bourne. I should have seen the glow of city edges. Instead, the road ran into itself like a loop pulled tight. Twice I saw a collapsed barn on the right shoulder with a windmill that leaned to it, and twice more I saw it, each time nursing the same bad feeling in my throat as if I had swallowed a nailhead. Time put on the face of someone I once knew, and went on pretending he was a stranger. My dash clock climbed. My route app lost its mind and spun an empty compass. My mileage crept up and then down. At some point I started to talk, just words aloud that said nothing, to prove I still owned a voice. It was like talking inside a closet. My own words pressed against my face and went nowhere. The man behind me never wavered. The distance between us did not belong to miles. At a red reflector post dead ahead, I made a decision that, in daylight, would have looked foolish. I jammed the wheel and took the center median. Gravel gritted under the tires with a rush I could only feel in my hands. I pushed across the shallow dip, bounced up on the westbound lanes, and pointed the nose of the truck toward the black line I had just carved through. It felt like walking backward into a photograph. For an instant, the man disappeared. The mirror showed only the dark road falling away where he had been. Then he was ahead of me, crossing from the right shoulder to the left shoulder in the same steady angle, the same unhurried stride. I wanted to lay on the horn the way I never had in 20 years of driving nights. I wanted to break whatever rule was keeping the air wrapped up so tight and rip a ragged tear through it. Instead, I slowed to a creep and watched him pass up close, my hands slick, my breath shallow. He never turned. He might have been a ranger from a photograph in a courthouse hallway, hat brim drawing a black line across a covered face. The cuffs trembled and swung, showing me what was not there. His boots slid through light and shadow and never kissed the road. I passed him, and I passed the mile marker, and I passed the barn with the leaning windmill again. The median lights of a town floated across the horizon like a ship seen by a thirsty man. I aimed the truck at them and promised myself any lights would do, even a closed station with a soda machine out front. A sign appeared in the beams. Seguin, it said. Then it flickered to blankness, then it was gone. I drove under the sky's heavy lid and did not let myself think of how water presses on a swimmer who has gone too deep. When the fuel light blinked on, I told myself I could count 10 miles. When I counted 20 with no station, I decided I could count 20 more. At 30, my back hurt so bad I had to shift, and when I did, the corner of the bench seat poked my thigh like a finger. It was the sort of detail that matters when the big picture throws up its hands. I turned that discomfort into a structure and hung my sense of time on it. The truck coughed once and went quiet. The wheels hissed as they slowed. The highway unreeled without the motor, and for a few seconds I rode without sound in a body that might as well have belonged to the night. I coasted to the shoulder and let the rig settle. I kept both hands on the wheel because the alternative seemed like allowing something to put its hand on me. There is a way the dark has of pouring in when a machine winds down, soaking up warmth the way a window drinks evening. It happened then. The temperature on my neck dropped 3 degrees. I felt the opposite seats of childhood, as if I had sat down in a place that held my shape from another time. I did not hear him approach. I only knew he was there because the shadow inside the cab shifted. He stood beyond the open slit of the window, brim knocked with dust, hat ribbon frayed. The cuffs of his jeans showed threads. The boots were the kind any feed store in Texas keeps on a shelf near the door. He might have been anybody at a distance and nobody at all up close. He smelled like heated creosote in a room where someone has been ironing shirts, that sweet chemical press of steam and cloth. "Keep driving east," he said without speaking, and understanding the request felt like having a length of rope pushed into my hands. The fibers burned. "I'm out of gas," I said. "I cannot keep driving anything." He leaned down and the brim touched the edge of the window, and the part of my brain that wears a doctor's coat wrote down the note that his hat defied the glass without knocking or tapping. The more honest part did not look away. "Then walk with me," he said. I thought of the woman at the westbound table running her fingers along concrete seams. I thought of the barn and the windmill and the empty stations and the blank signs. I pictured my ex settling plates into a cupboard and wondered if the clatter had stopped, if the whole world had gone quiet, or if the silence belonged to this particular ribbon of blacktop. I wanted to beg for a different assignment. I wanted to fight pink-faced and clumsy, the way you do when you hear yourself more than you hear the other person. None of that made it out of my throat. You can fight a man. You cannot fight a rule. He was a rule given shape. "I have cargo," I said, as if that made me a person with a reason to be left alone. "You will walk," he said. I looked down at my legs. My feet were where I had left them, planted on the rubber mat with little ribs designed to catch the grit. My boots were scuffed from the last load at a loading dock in Van Horn. I lifted my right foot and put it back down and felt the exact weight of it. The clean, plain miracle of friction. I made myself count to 10. I opened the door. The night folded around me and I stepped down. The first step felt wrong in a small way, like missing the last stair in a flight you have taken in the dark 100 times. The second step felt wrong, in a way that cut at the center of what I thought waking up meant. The third step told me the road was there and not there, that the place where rubber meets tar is a contract and the ink on mine had been scrubbed off. The soles of my boots hung over nothing, and yet I moved forward. The man with the hat turned, without looking back, and the two of us took the same angle into the lane and across it toward the median. You do not realize how much noise your body makes until it stops. There was no scuff, no shoelace whisper, no breath. I could feel my lungs working, feel the burn, but the air refused to perform. We crossed all 6 lanes and the median grass, and the scrub, and began down a slope that did not exist the day before. Rocks bit at the heels of nothing. The brim never lifted. I wanted to know if the face under the hat belonged to anyone. The fear that it might be mine was a childish fear finally, and it stayed. We walked a long time. We walked past a wrecked pickup I had not seen in the beams. Its hood folded like a broken knuckle, its windshield powdered. We walked along the drainage path where a trickle of water moved like the shiny skin of a snake and made no sound. We walked until my legs ached with work that did not land. The highway rested on the rise to our right like a train sitting quiet on a siding. At some point my fear changed shape and became something like a choiceless patience, a waiting that carried its own weight. The man's cuffs swung and brushed and revealed absence again and again until it was no longer a surprise. The plainest facts put down roots first. I thought it would end with a howl or a gate or a threshold that could be named. It ended with a picnic table. He stopped beside it and angled his head toward the concrete slab with its gritty surface and its pores like tiny mouths. "You can sit," he said. "Will I have to stay?" My voice held a little human hope that did not belong to the quiet around us, and I hated it for that. "You can sit," he said again, and he turned and walked back toward the slope, toward the median, toward the line. He did not look back. The brim stirred and settled. The cuffs revealed the same slow emptiness. He moved with the patience of gravity. He moved like a rule. I sat. The concrete was warm from a day I could no longer smell. The bench put its familiar narrow ache in my thighs. From that angle, the westbound lot opened like a stage set, the lamps leaning into one another, the little signs gleaming and holding their stillness. The woman with the feed store cap walked her squares along the curb. Across the highway, the eastbound lot sat in the mirror of it, a second stage that never touched the first. We were two notes held in the same bar without touching. A dragonfly skated across the air and made no sound. The creosote smell lifted once and fell like a hand. My own boots hung above the dust by the thickness of one idea. Cars came sometimes. I could see them as light slabs floating through the cut of the hills, bright fish in a dead lake. The drivers looked straight ahead with hands planted at 10 and 2. Some saw nothing. Some flicked their eyes toward the median and narrowed them, and you could tell the ones who knew they had seen something and were already building a story to smother it. Once a kid in a flatbed stared so hard his neck turned. His mouth opened. He sat up higher. I lifted a hand, and it meant nothing because distance and quiet had built themselves a glass wall. The kid's brake lights fluttered, and then the truck rolled on and folded into the next curve. I sat through a short night and a long one. Shadows edged across the table lip in lines as neat as rules on a school desk. In the hours that were wrong enough to unteach you time, he returned again and again, sometimes crossing west to east, sometimes east to west, always at that angle, always with the hat brim pulling a line through what I could not see. I learned the shape of waiting the way you learn the shape of your own hand. I learned who sits and who walks. I learned, without anyone telling me, when to lean forward and when to fold my hands between my knees and when to watch the median. A month later, or an hour later, a man in a blue sedan pulled into the eastbound lot with his face tight and his knuckles white on the wheel. He got out and turned in a slow circle as if the world needed to be looked at from every side to be believed. He saw me watching him from across the lanes. He lifted a hand and I lifted one back, and it was like watching a foreign film without the soundtrack. We stood facing one another and felt something pass between us that did not require air. He lowered his hand and got back into the car and drove away. He did not look back into his mirror. He would later. They always do. Sound came one day like rain on dry ground. It came in a patchy way that let me know it belonged to the world and not to me. A truck went through with a tarp snapping, and I heard it as if from underwater. A woman laughed on a phone. The lamps gave a thin insect music. The creosote and the iron smell and the dust were joined by the faint plastic tang of a soda bottle. I knew what it meant. I could stand if I chose. I could test the road and find gravel under my soles again. When I felt my feet pinch inside my boots and touch down, I was surprised and ashamed to find that I stood slowly. I looked toward the lane. He was not there. He would give me time. He always did. I walked to the eastbound curb and traced the concrete seams with my toes. I put my hands in my pockets the way the woman had. I thought of a blue sink rug that someone might feel again under their heels. I thought of nothing good or bad, only the plain length of the lines that keep the world together. The sun burned behind thin cloud. The air gave back sounds in working order. When I turned, a man with a hat stood on the far side of the lot and tipped the brim without lifting his head. He was not the one who had come for me the first night. He was someone else wearing a rule like a coat. He stepped to the edge of the concrete, and the light around him lapped like water around a piling, and he waited the way a turn waits at the bend in a road. I know now why the boots scrape without noise. The world turns and makes a long, soft hush, and we ride it most days without hearing. On these nights and on this stretch, the hush deepens and we move inside it. What you never expect is how quickly you come to understand it. How quickly you count concrete seams and watch for the angle. How quickly you measure the shadows along the table and try to decide if you will stand or sit or walk. If you drive east at night on I-10 and the air seems a little too still and the signs look washed, do not slow and do not stare hard into the mirror. If you must look, do it only once. If you see the hat, drive and keep driving. If the fuel light plays with you, it will win. If you have to stop, choose a table and hold your place. The man with no feet will cross, and if he lifts the brim toward you, he is already close enough to speak, and if he speaks, you will hear him whether you want to or not. I do not wish it on you because wishing has nothing to do with rules, and he is nothing if not a rule dressed in denim and a hat turned down against a wind no one else can feel. The horizon was a straight edge pressed against the sky, the kind of clean line you only get out near Fort Stockton, where the Chihuahuan desert starts taking its time, and every mile looks like an old photograph. I had been driving since dawn with a cooler of melted ice and a dashboard that rattled whenever the wind changed directions. By late afternoon, the heat had climbed onto my back and stayed there. The map apps showed a smear of dead zones ahead, and my cell had already dipped to one flickering bar. I told myself I'd keep going until the sun slid behind the mesas, then find a place to call ahead and say I'd be late. I had a room in Del Rio booked under a rate that sounded like a promise and a friend there who owed me beer, and the thought of both kept my foot on the gas. The truck's temperature needle told another story. It drifted right of center and kept on drifting. When the light for the radiator flashed a red eye, I eased off the highway onto a caliche turnout. The wind threw grit across the hood. I cut the engine and listened to metal tick as if the truck were speaking under its breath. The shoulder was empty in both directions. A sun-bleached billboard promised brisket in a town I'd already passed. Off to the right, set back from the road behind a stand of poor, stubborn mesquite. A squat building wore the shroud of a closed station, windows cloudy with dust, a shadowed awning, pump islands capped with black bags tied neat like the ends of trash. From the cinder block wall near the door, a gray payphone stared at the road like a watcher. I don't know why it felt like a kindness that the phone was there. Maybe it was the suggestion that someone had once cared enough to give strangers a line out. My phone said no service in letters bright enough to be smug. I took the bottle of water from the cooler, swallowed as if the liquid might do more than it could, and crossed the hot gravel to the payphone. The receiver was heavier than it looked, the cord a metal coil that tugged when I lifted. The coin slot had been taped long ago, but the dial tone came up smooth and flat like an open field. It was surprising, that sound. Proof that some thin copper vein still ran under all this and connected to somewhere with lights and people. I juggled pockets for quarters out of habit and dropped one in even though the tone said I didn't need to. My fingers punched the familiar digits of my brother in Careville. The ringing started. 2 clean notes repeated across a great distance. It rang 3 times, then the line went quiet. Not with a click, not with the gentle fall of a voicemail greeting, but with a soft exhale of static. I said hello to the empty sound. The wind pushed dust along the ground and pecked the side of the booth. I said my name to identify myself because that's what you do, even when nobody is there. Then I remembered the instructions I'd lived by for the last year, as if superstition could hold a life together. Do not offer more than the situation requires. So I swallowed my name back and said, "It's me. Truck trouble. I'm near Fort Stockton. Could use a ride or a fresh jug of coolant." What came through the line was not my brother. It was a whisper that seemed to start in the static and then steep itself in it, shaping a sound the way the wind sculpts a dune. The whisper knew exactly how my name sits in a mouth. It said it in a way only people who have called me for years say it. Lazy on the first syllable and pressed on the second. A rhythm I had never noticed until I heard it land in that ear cup. It did not ask if it had the right person. It did not sound surprised. It said my name like it had been waiting to say it. I pulled the receiver away and studied the mouthpiece. I looked around the lot. A grasshopper clicked off the awning post and disappeared into weeds. Far out past the road, a dry wash cut a line through the flats. I pressed the receiver back to my ear and said, "I did not give you my name." The line breathed in. The line breathed out. A truck went by on I-10 and left a long dress of sound behind it. While it faded, the whisper came again, closer now, though the volume had not changed. It was the sense of distance that changed, the way you can tell when someone speaking in a dark room has moved from the doorway to the foot of the bed. It said my name and then said the kind of thing that makes the skin around the eyes tighten, because you feel watched by something that doesn't need eyes. It said, "You're late." I told myself I had been late to 100 things. Work, holidays, the funeral. I pretended I was too busy to reach on time. There are explanations for lateness. There are lives built on them. I told myself the old station had a line crossed somewhere, 2 circuits pinched together, a frequency bleeding. I told myself the voice could be a trucker with a radio trick. You can tell yourself a lot in the space between one breath and the next. I hung up, which is a small victory when every part of you wants to stand still and let the world explain itself. I walked back to the truck. The radiator had cooled enough to open the cap without scalding my hand. The water hissed as it met metal and then settled. I took another drink while the wind worried a torn poster on the station's wall, until it lifted in a flap that showed a square of darker paint beneath. The shadow of the awning cut straight angles on the gravel. The air had that strange desert trick where it smells like rain and dust at the same time. I told myself I had imagined how my name sounded. I told myself I had waited in a booth so long that the mind decided to make company. Then the payphone rang. The bell is mechanical in a phone like that. You can feel it in your molars when it starts up close. The first ring made me stiffen. The second ring pulled me around. By the third ring, I was already crossing back. I lifted the receiver on the fourth and did not say a word. The whisper did not say hello. It did not have to. It said my name again because that was the hook. And then it said a sentence I had spoken years ago into a different phone while standing on the shoulder of a county road, hands scratched with glass, teeth grit against the taste of blood and antifreeze. It said, "I didn't see him step out." I had said those words to a calm operator on a line that carried alarms to men who drove fast. The operator had asked for my name. I had given it because people used to being believed know the power of handing your name to strangers. I had given my name and given my version, and the men arrived later in vehicles that made the night look technical and official and clean. They asked me again what I had seen, and I said it again because repetition is the handrail you seize when everything tilts. I didn't see him step out. The words were like a coin pressed into a palm. They had felt good then, bright and certain and simple. The desert had been cooler that night, and the sky had been a black so complete it felt like pressure. The headlights had cut down to a circle tight enough to make anything you pointed at look like the entire world. It had been my fault and not my fault, and I had learned how to live with both setting wise in me like 2 separate suns. I had not planned on hearing my own sentence spoken back to me by a mouth I could not picture in a booth that did not belong to anybody. I told the whisper to stop. I told it I had no interest in old statements. I told it we all have lives to return to. The voice did not argue. It said, "It's colder where I am." I didn't answer, and it said, "You didn't bring a blanket." The payphone cord felt heavier then. The desert seemed to inhale and hold it. I was aware of small things. A translucent spider working in a corner no bigger than a coin. A thread of black antenna sticking out of a dead moth on the sill. No cars passed for a long breath. When one finally did, I wanted it to slow so badly my teeth hurt. It didn't. I tried my brother again to prove the world was still arranged the way I understood. The number rang once, then broke with the faintly cheerful tone of a voicemail. I left a message that wandered. While I spoke, something brushed the outer ear cup like the drag of a fingertip. The whisper said my name very softly in the space right above where my jaw meets my neck. And the natural thing to do there is to turn and look, because the body takes every sound literally. I saw the open road and thin scrub and a hawk hanging motionless and workmanlike in the daylight. I saw my truck waiting with its windows up and its tires slogged into shallow pockets in the gravel. Then I saw that the handset cord was moving, not wildly. Not like a live thing, but like a rope being turned slowly by someone below my hand. I told the voice I was going now. I set the receiver down with a careful finality. It fell off the cradle and swung, and the bell inside the phone gave a tiny sympathetic note as if the machine were sorry too. I didn't want to leave it dangling, but also didn't want to put my hand near it again. I walked to the truck with a focus so tight it made the distance seem longer than it was. In the cab, the heat sat heavy. I turned the key and the engine came alive, grumbling and then smoothing into a strong idle. I let out a breath I had been holding for longer than I thought. The mirror showed the square of wall with the phone on it. The receiver swayed once more and then settled as if a decision had been reached. I put the truck in gear and rolled toward the exit. People talk about roads you can feel under your feet. The grooves cut deep by decisions. I didn't believe that before, I do now. The front wheels reached the edge of the turnout and went soft as if the surface had changed under them. The steering wheel tugged right in a slow, polite insistence. I corrected. It tugged again, a fraction harder. I corrected again, and the wheel fought me like the arms of a tired child. I braked, and the pedal pulsed under my foot as if it belonged to someone else. The truck drifted sideways, and I tapped the gas to straighten her out, and the engine coughed and died as if I had flooded it by turning a knob I couldn't see. I sat there with the hazard lights clicking in the quiet like a metronome that has lost interest in time. The breeze carried the faintest scent of wet rock, though the sky burned a hard blue and the only cloud was a smear of chalk that had not moved since noon. The payphone rang again. The tone was the same because metal is honest. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3. I counted to 9 in my head without knowing why, and lifted my hands from the wheel because something in me had already learned this choreography. I got out slowly. I kept my eyes on the ground between the truck and the booth, because the empty space is sometimes safer than the place where meaning clusters. The phone rang a 4th time and stopped. When I reached it, the receiver was still on the cradle as if it had never fallen. I lifted it and heard the faint hum of a line open to the world. The whisper did not begin with my name. It said a different name, and the moment I heard it, the rusted cab of my memory fell open and let out cold air. It said Ben. I had not heard that name out loud in years in any honorable way. There had been texts and brief sidelong mentions, but no one I loved said it full in my presence because they loved me. Ben had been on the shoulder that night with me, and he had stepped forward because he wanted to be certain the driver we had clipped was breathing. He had stepped into the dark beyond the circle of our lights, and the long, silent wake of a passing rig tugged the air hard and drew him off his feet. He had fallen and landed wrong.
He had said my name once in a way that was surprised and ordinary.
The way you say it when you pass a friend in the aisle at H-E-B. I had told the operator I didn't see him step out because by the time those words left my mouth, I had already decided the life I could live with. It wasn't that nobody knew. It was that nobody knew exactly. There is a difference you can build a decade on. The whisper said, "You were late to call." I said no. I said I called right away, and my voice sounded thin to me, like a radio announcing a flood in a different county. The whisper said, "You waited to see if you could fix it alone." I said no again. I said we are all allowed one bad night. The whisper said, "The lines remember." The wind lifted the torn poster and let it fall. The hawk had become a black punctuation over the flats, hanging there without any visible motion, an expert at pretending time was not moving when it always is. I asked the voice where it was. I asked like I had a right. It said, "At the end of the line." It said where it's colder. It said, "Bring a blanket." That last sentence reached in and pressed on an old bruise because we had left the blanket in the trunk under the jumper cables while we stood stupid in the headlight circle and argued about whether we should go back for it. He had said he was fine and we should keep the weight on the leg the way the trainer had said back in high school. I had believed him because belief is a softer thing to carry than responsibility. The payphone made a small sound, a click like a needle finding a groove. Then I heard a different voice behind the whisper. My voice hoarse, speaking into traffic, saying, "Hello, emergency, there's been an accident." The operator's voice came small and professional through layers of distance and time. She asked for my name, I gave it. The whisper breathed in as if it had been waiting at that doorway. And then I heard steps on gravel that were not mine, slow and careful, as if whoever moved had to make sure of each foot. It is a peculiar feeling to stand in daylight and also feel night closing around your shoulders. The booth grew cooler. The glass felt colder where my knuckle brushed it. Through the mouthpiece came a sound like a hand on a door I had locked years ago. Then the whisper spoke. Not close this time, but from somewhere down the line, and behind it was a clatter like a switchboard being worked by a careful person. It said, "You can come now." It said, "I waited." It said, "You know the way because the turn is your turn." I told it I did not want to come anywhere, and the words felt childish and false. The whisper said my name and then said, "Don't make me dial the boy you'll be next time." I dropped the receiver. It hit the metal plate and bounced and hung. The bell inside the case chimed like a glass struck by a fork. I walked backward, then turned and ran the last steps to the truck because sometimes the body takes over and becomes honest. The key turned and nothing happened. The lights died and came back and died again. I hit the steering wheel with my palm, and the impulse traveled through the column and into the frame and into the ground and into whatever lay under the ground. A slow, friendly hum came up through the floorboards, the sort of hum you hear in a building with old lights when the ballast warms. It put a gentle thrum against my bones that made my ribs feel like a rack of tuned forks. When the truck started, it did so the way an exhausted man gets out of a chair. I dropped it into gear and eased onto the highway. The booth shrank in the mirror until it was a small gray box against a large gray wall. I expected relief to arrive as a physical event, a loosening. It didn't. The hum stayed in the cab. The mirror showed a rectangle with a dot in it, and the dot felt like an eye. After a mile, the radio came alive by itself on a station with no station, a ribbon of static that wasn't empty. Under it, so low I had to lean toward the speaker. My name came again, not once, not twice, but in a slow measured rhythm as steady as a heartbeat. I twisted the knob and the static rose as if rising to greet me. I shut it off and the sound went away from the speaker and settled in the vents, then in the glass, then in the small edges where plastic meets metal. The desert held its breath. The sun bent toward the mesas and turned the world to long angles. I drove like a man following a line somebody else had drawn, and at each lift in the road there was the sense of wires under the asphalt arranged in a pattern a human voice could ride if it wanted to, by the time Del Rio's lights showed in the dark. My phone had bars again. It lay face down on the passenger seat as if ashamed. When I flipped it over, the screen was clear of notifications. Then, while I watched, a text bubble appeared and wrote out a sentence letter by letter in a font designed to calm the mind. It wrote my name and then added, "I didn't see him step out." The sender field was blank. I powered the phone off and it stayed dim for a full 10 seconds before the screen came back on by itself, long enough to draw a single thin line across a black background, like a horizon. I checked into the room and let the shower beat dust out of my hair. The mirror saw a man who looked like me but tired around the eyes in a way you cannot sleep through. I lay down and kept waking to the small life of the room, the refrigerator compressing and relaxing, the air unit breathing. A little after 2 a.m., the room phone rang and I grabbed it without thinking because some habits live deep and don't ask permission. I said hello and a switch clicked on some old board somewhere, and a woman's voice that had earned its calm said, "Emergency? What is your name?" And before I could hang up, she said my name for me softly, the way a person who loves you says it when you come in late and pretend you meant to, and in the background there were steps on gravel and a wind that smelled like rain that wasn't coming, and a faint, careful humming that sounded like wires strung tight over a long, empty land. In the morning I drove past Fort Stockton and did not look for the turnout. The sun was new and honest and the road was the same road I had taken the day before, but thinner somehow, stretched. My phone stayed quiet in the cup holder, but at every set of power lines that crossed the highway the radio hissed without being turned on, and the hiss shaped itself for a heartbeat into the syllables of my name. Somewhere west of Ozona, I passed a maintenance crew shouldering spools of cable. They had that look people get when they handle something alive. I wanted to roll down the window and ask them whether copper could keep a voice the way a jar keeps a scent, long after the flowers are gone. I wanted to ask whether sometimes a call gets stuck inside the line like a seed lodged in a crack and waits for the exact weight of a certain footfall to open. I did not ask. I drove on with both hands at 10 and 2 like a man learning again. Since then, the phone rings at hours when it should be quiet. It rings in houses where there are no landlines, and in cars moving fast under vaults of sky. When I answer, it is a breath first and then a careful whisper, always polite, always patient, never angry. The way a voice is when it knows that patience is its sharpest edge. It says my name like a truth and then says, "You can come now," and the line hums like something strung tight between poles through a country where the distances look calm and the stories are carried forward by wind. I tell it no and it says that's all right, it can wait. And the hum lingers in the bones like a song you heard once and asked the name of, and we're told there isn't one. It's just the sound the wires make when they remember.